we talk so you can tell if it's going through?
It picks up movements as long as I see the volume moving,
Gotcha.
we're generally okay. Okay, it looks like we're all set.
Okay. So, good evening and welcome everyone. Today is June 11th, 2026. It's Thursday, and we will now begin the School District of Menominee Falls Board of Education Curriculum and Learning Committee meeting. The current time is 6 p.m. and we are meeting at Village Hall Upper Level Conference Room 3344/45, W156 North 8480 Pilgrim Road in Menominee Falls, Wisconsin. There is a possibility that a quorum of the full membership of the Board of Education may be in attendance at committee meetings. No official action will be taken by the full board at committee meetings. Only members of the committee may vote on agenda items. A live broadcast is being streamed on the school district's YouTube page. To watch recorded meetings, please visit the school district's YouTube channel. Ms. Riebel, was the meeting properly posted?
Yes, it was.
Okay, so first is we have to do approval of the minutes from the May 27th, 2026 Curriculum Committee meeting. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll motion to approve it.
I'll second.
So a motion by Becky, second by Steve. Any discussion or corrections? All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. All right, the motion carries. That's the easy part. All right, so for our first discussion item, we are going to, well, actually, it's gonna start off with the Curriculum Committee Guiding Framework. And so that's actually going to be led by me, funny enough, or not. So basically, I wanted to go through, and I'll go through pretty quickly, we don't need to like be laborious about this, but myself, this committee, we're all new here as far as being on this committee, and so we wanted to bring forth just some kind of guiding framework that we want to use for curriculum review and adoption. As I said, I'll go through this quickly, but of course, if you have questions, interrupt, and I'll even ask if you have them along the way. So to start, the most important part is our purpose for doing this. Our goal is to have evidence-based governance while we're doing this work. And so we've created this framework to just establish a common language that we want to use to really monitor the health of our district's curriculum. This isn't saying that maybe this has never been done before or this was missing. It was more of our intent is about strengthening transparency within curriculum adoption and review processes. Our intent is to promote collaboration among teachers, administrators, and ourselves. And we want to support evidence-based recommendations and instructional best practices for consideration when we bring it to the Board of Education. So really the intent is more on our side to be very transparent with community and ensure that we're just consistent with what we're recommending. Our process for this framework is designed to use multiple sources of evidence, and we are always wanting to examine three main pillars, is kind of what I'm saying: curriculum, implementation, and student learning. You'll see as I go through more detail, we want to ask guiding questions across each area, and then we'll reach evidence-based committee determination, and then we're making a commitment to providing transparent communication when we bring recommendations to the full board. So the next slides will be me going through curriculum and learning review, and then I'll say a little bit more about the determination and how we want to communicate. So here's kind of like our three pillars. I do want to say before I start that each pillar will have similar formats to like the page. So I'm not going to like read every single thing off of these slides. And so just know that I'll summarize each page. So for curriculum, this is kind of like the foundation. Know that what we'll be coming with, what we're focusing on is the curriculum aligned to state standards and district learning goals? That's kind of what, we're really trying to focus on. And then obviously we'll hear from people like the connection to the standards or research-based alignment or things of that nature. Or whatever you guys really feel would help inform us. And then know that some guiding inquiries that we may not even necessarily say out loud, but asking ourselves to help with review and maybe even ask questions beyond this, but so that you know kind of what we're thinking related to curriculum is how does the curriculum integrate state standards into students' daily learning experiences? And then where are the intentional areas of focus or potential gaps? Again, we are not looking for perfection. We are not looking for everything to be going wonderfully all the time. We're working with children. And so don't be intimidated by potential gaps. It's more just, how our frame of reference will be. So then next is implementation, or kind of like the reality, right? What's going on in the classrooms. Our focus related to implementation has to do with, is the curriculum being implemented effectively? The information we want to review, this is really the part where we really want to hear from teachers and just kind of get a good understanding of what's happening on the ground. So I do appreciate we have 2 teachers here today, and I know we'll have some statements. But beyond that, obviously we can hear about what's going on in the classroom in a variety of ways, through observations or implementation data. So again, not an exhaustive list, but that was on my mind when I was writing that. But for the guiding inquiries, we're really going to be listening for, or maybe even asking, to what extent is the curriculum being implemented as intended? What do we learn from staff feedback and observations about the resources or conditions needed to implement the curriculum effectively? So that would be more for our own reflection. And then what patterns of consistency or inconsistency exist across grade levels or schools? And again, more of these questions being like, how can we help? What can we do to help this work? And then lastly is student learning. So that's our third pillar that we'll be kind of coming from, and the focus with that is student learning improving and accessible to all learners. This is where, we don't need to see reams of students' examples at all, that's not what I'm saying, but any ways that we can just see, how are things aligned developmentally, or how are things working for access with different groups of students, ways to just help us see that. But our guiding inquiries are, what does the data show about student progress toward mastery across all student groups and access to learning opportunities? And then where are the opportunities to better support student learning and growth across all groups? Again, I'm not saying you guys aren't thinking this way. This is just for us to also be transparent with how we're thinking as well. So I'll pause for a second. Any questions on our 3 pillars and kind of where we're coming from? All right. So then, just so that we're very clear then, we'll come to some committee recommendations, which again, this is very typical what we would do on a committee. But just so that we have the shared language, we'll come to some kind of determination. We'll either say awesome, continue your current practices, well done, thanks for the update. We might say, we might want to continue monitoring that. We might want to see more, and so maybe it's hey, can we see this again in 3 months, 6 months, a year, whatever, to just kind of be maybe we should loop back around. And then the last one would be if we recommend action, that would be, us being more advisory to the full board of being as we looked at this stuff, we saw things missing, and we might need to take action on it. And again, this is all just to create a clear roadmap for the board so they know exactly what the committee has investigated and why we are recommending a specific course of action. So then lastly, I'm just plainly saying we're making a commitment as the curriculum committee to then bring forth all of this information to the board if something were to come to a vote. We'll provide a summary of information that we reviewed, our committee determination, and then any recommendations we make. And just, again, I guess I just want to say we understand that this is advisory in nature. We are making no votes of our own as the 3 of us, but we just really want to inform board discussion and support transparent, evidence-based decision-making prior to any board action. So that is our framework that we want to come from as a committee. Any questions, comments? Let's work together. So yes, just want to be transparent and share where we're at.
Excellent, thank you. And I appreciate the opportunity to look at this the other day and kind of talk through that, because I think as you'll hear that lots of things are in place as we talked about, but it's a good opportunity to kind of reflect, and being a continuous improvement district, we're always working to get better.
Yeah. Perfect.
Thank you.
Yes. All All right, so then we are going to move on to the rest of our discussion items, and I'm aware that we are going to be covering a lot. I'm excited to hear what's going on. And yeah, let's get into it, right? So first
to talk at double speed or?
would you like? No, that's why I talked double speed.
Alright,
So that we would give you adequate time.
Yeah, first of all, thank you. Again, we have, yes, a couple of really heavy updates tonight with a lot of information, but a good opportunity to reflect on where we've been in different curricular areas where we've had implementation over the last couple of years. This year was the first year of elementary social studies, so that is where we'll start. And we're excited to have a couple of teacher representatives. Appreciate them coming on the first day of summer vacation. I was hoping, because I knew we had some meetings happening in schools, we might be able to tap into more people. And unfortunately, it turns out that the first day of summer vacation is a day people have lots of good plans. So I appreciate you being able to squeeze us into your plans. And I will introduce Nina Overholzer, and I'll let her introduce her guest here in a little bit. To just walk through what elementary social studies has looked like in our elementary schools this year in year one of implementation. So let me know when I need to scroll. I don't always read the cues, so date me if I get it wrong.
All right. Well, yes, I'm Nina Overholzer and excited to be able to speak on behalf of this. I'm one of the people still in town. We're the remaining 3 people in the elementary that did not leave Menominee Falls. So the 3 of us is who you get. So I by no means can take credit for this great year, but I will just speak on behalf of it. So, I mean, quite honestly, at first it was like, do this presentation, June 11th. I was like, oh gosh, one more thing. And then I thought, you know what, that's really how a lot of the teachers felt. Like, oh my gosh, one more thing. So, but then as I really got into it and was reflecting back on the year, I'm like, actually, this is such a privilege to be able to share, because it really kind of went from one more thing to like, oh my gosh, this is really great. We're having a lot of good learning and good teaching, and we're ready to like move into year 2. So it really picked up traction as the year went on, and now I feel just really honored and so proud to be able to like share that here tonight and not feeling like it's one more thing, which I think is a position we've heard from teachers as well, that they're feeling that too, which is also evidenced by 2 people being willing to come out in a tornado watch, pouring rain. So we are here just to give you, this is kind of a gist of what will be, how we got here. Then we'll take a look at this year in the first year of implementation, and then just touch on where we're headed for next year. So as you guys are 3 new members of our committee, just wanted to take a moment just to kind of bring you up to speed with our piloting and curriculum review process, because it is a pretty detailed, thorough process in our district here. So the work actually began back in September of 23 with the researching, looking at the standards. We did some PD with CISA 1. So the process really began all the way back there to get to the point of our piloting year in 24-25. So we got to the point of being able to bring 4 resources to the curriculum review committee. Then 2 pilot classrooms at each grade level. And we have all the teachers that were a part of that. So it was a large group that all tried out the various resources. There was training. We did some co-planning and teaching. Along the way, we do elicit a lot of feedback from students, parents, teachers are really giving a lot of feedback along the way. Then it comes to the recommendation to the board, and then we move into figuring out how to implement. So that's, and just to kind of make you aware of all the feedback sources we have throughout. Yeah, you can keep going. Yep. So just a little snippet of during a pilot, we had weekly feedback surveys, we had a mid-pilot check-in, the comparison side by side of the resources, because if I'm only piloting one and you're piloting the other, I really don't know, I only know mine. So we have take the time to get people side by side with that. observations and really seeing the resource in action. Teachers are doing an evaluation based on the criteria that was established at the start, getting feedback from students through a survey as well as families through a survey, and then it ultimately comes to that consensus meeting to bring it to the board. So there is a lot of feedback throughout and a lot of people that are a part of this process. So ultimately, McGraw-Hill Impact Social Studies was selected. And just for your awareness, it is a resource that is aligned to Wisconsin state standards and also the C3 framework. The way it's set up is that there's an essential question to launch each of those chapters and really drive the investigation. There's a lot of vocabulary and EL support. At point of use, which was important, we didn't want it, buried somewhere. We want it right where you're doing the teaching. Citizenship through the Take Action projects, and then the instructional format of each chapter is engage, and then students investigate the essential question, and then ultimately report and take action. There's an inquiry project that goes with each of the chapters, so then that's ultimately where they are answering and responding to that essential question. All right. So this year was year one, and so in year one, we knew what we knew from the pilot, but obviously a pilot is just a snippet. And so this year we really tried to try out most things, tried to really dig into all of the components so that we could learn and get feedback and figure out really what were the essential parts. And all along the way, part of our work was to be looking for that standards alignment, looking for any gaps, but also looking for any overlaps or redundancies. We were really trying to figure out, going into year two, what can we learn from our experiences year one? And so based on that, this will be our scope and sequence for next year with the learning. And the structure is a little different in K3 than it is in 4-5. In K3, it's like a geography chapter, a history chapter. It's really by those strands. And in 4-5, it's integrated, where 4th grade is going into the United States and learning about those various regions. And then 5th grade is making a new nation. So the building up to the Revolutionary War. So 4-5 is structured a little bit differently, but still with all that same content, learning, and application of learning. All right, so that gets us to this year. You guys had agreed to that curriculum resource, and so we proceeded putting forward a plan. And we wanted to really map out a clear and thoughtful roadmap. We wanted to try our best to put systems and processes in place to have the most successful implementation possible. And so we mapped out a scaffolded approach where with the first chapter teachers would be teaching, which isn't necessarily chapter 1, but just the first chapter you're teaching, that you are beginning the year with those components of the teacher edition, the student research companion, and inquiry journal. So during that first chapter, we really wanted, let's get this off the ground, let's start with the first bones, let's get our feet wet, get students into the resources and learning, and then as each chapter went on throughout the year, we layered in kind of one more component. Now that you've got those physical pieces in place, let's try out some of the digital resources. So now we're kind of got 2 plates spinning. Chapter 3, let's bring on the student digital resources. Now we're gonna get 3 plates spinning. So we wanted that to map out that kind of plan. But knowing too, I actually just took the draft watermark off of this for our presentation because it was a draft, best laid plans, but then you monitor and gather feedback along the way. So you'll notice like it says updated 10-15. Well, we started the year, best laid plans, and then had to pause and shift a little. So we began implementing that you would give the chapter assessment at the end. Everyone's gonna try it, we're gonna gather the feedback, we're gonna see how it goes. We knew in piloting that they weren't amazing assessments, but we thought, you know what? Maybe we just piloted a chapter that the assessment was a little weaker. Maybe we just, didn't know enough to do our best teaching for the students to demonstrate that learning. Let's give it a try. Well, quickly, the teachers let us know. They were like, holy cow, what is with these? You gotta do something about this. We said, we hear you, we kind of knew that was coming, but we got it. So we're gonna pause, we're gonna shift gears a little and really pour ourselves into and devote a lot of time and collaborative work to revising those chapter assessments. So even though we did have a clear implementation plan, we still were continually gathering that feedback and information along the way and willing to make pivots. So ultimately, we did write new assessments that were more closely aligned to the learning targets that the students were engaged in, aligned to the standards, and it really was a lot of work and time, but it was a very collaborative effort that it seems to be really allowing students to demonstrate their learning and their knowledge much better. And the final part of the plan is kind of the lower half with mapping out some of the supports. So we do have some training and professional development supports, but then also that day-to-day and real-time support. And this was where our coaches and coaching was just instrumental in this first year of implementation, because they were really able to just come right alongside to partner with the teacher teams in co-planning, to be in classrooms in co-teaching, to help take a look at the data or gather that feedback, have those conversations. So it really was a very collaborative process, and that allowed, I think, teachers to feel supported and also allowed students to really demonstrate their learning and to be more engaged in the learning. And it allows us to be able to improve for next year because we were right there alongside as it went. So that was the plan for the year. So throughout the year, August, we had our initial kickoff training. So that resource training, we did use the McGraw-Hill training video along with those teachers who were pilot teachers. Were kind of now the lead because they had gone through a little bit, they had a little experience, and then the CLC, those curriculum learning coaches, kicked off that first training in August. In January, we had the McGraw-Hill trainer, and that we really separated out to what feedback we were hearing and what needs there were. So we had a K2 session, a K1 session, a 2-3 session, and a 4-5. In our best attempt to get at what teachers were requesting and looking for and wanting more support in. At the February Professional Development Day, we dug into learning about the Wisconsin Social Studies standards. And in April, May, it wasn't a PD day, but it was an early release in each of the 4 elementary schools. And then that training went deeper into the Wisconsin inquiry standards and planning for your inquiry project. So that was the kind of main training professional development sessions, partnered with that coaching support. So just that you're aware, our elementary curriculum learning coaches, they support in 2 buildings. So the 2 K2s is 1 person and the 2 3-5s is a person. And so we put together a plan where the coach would work very closely with a grade level in a building at a time. So during an entire chapter with 1. So ultimately, every grade level and every team and every teacher had that close support, they just didn't have it all at the same time. And so we put together that model because we felt like it was really important to have that close supportive collaboration rather than just trying to touch base with everybody every day all the time and really just not be able to go deep with any of the teams. And sometimes you lay out plans and they all work out great and sometimes they don't. We were real lucky that we had this idea and we rolled it out and it seemed to work really well. So I think we'll speak to that a little more in just a moment. But connection to targeted instructional pacing. So as you're probably aware with most resources, there's tons. They're trying to sell a product to everybody. So anything you might want, we've got it. Buy our book because we've got everything. So it is great in one sense, And it is difficult in another sense because there is no way that you ever have enough time to use every single thing in a resource. So then that begs the question like, well, what do you use? So we partnered with McGraw-Hill and also our grade level leads and our curriculum learning coaches to help offer guidance towards if these are your learning objectives for this unit, and these are the standards you're working towards. These particular learning activities or reading passages will help facilitate like more streamlined progress towards reaching that goal. And so that work was put in with those instructional pacing guides to try to help clear some of the clutter and provide a more guided path. A lot of work was done with the Wisconsin standards in the resource, aligning to the instruction, the assessments, the inquiry projects. I talked about the assessments a little bit, so that was a part of our, the big work this year really focused on a variety of question types and then also the alignment, that what we're teaching is in line with what we're assessing. We did gather student data throughout the year. We wanted to be able to monitor that achievement and get some student feedback. And then gathering the teacher feedback was integral. So they are the ones closest to the work day in, day out. They hear from the families, they see how the students are doing, and so having a place. So we did set up a Plus Delta tool where they had a document to capture some specific like, this was too fast, this didn't work, more of this, question 8 is very confusing, we need to take a look at that. So they had a place that they could document. And then our CLCs were also connecting with those grade level leads to get that feedback. In addition to when they were working with a team, they were right there in those meetings and in the rooms.
So those were all the ways we kind of worked on training, support, and got feedback throughout this year. And just a little bit about coaching. So our coaches and our coaching model and our coaches, we worked within kind of these 5 keywords, I guess, bringing the disposition to the teams in the classroom. So having that non-evaluative, supportive approach that we're really partnering, that second one, partnering alongside teams in their weekly planning meetings and in the classrooms. The coaches were able to provide some clarity with setting up lesson plans or making the goals clear, the explicit learning targets, all so that we could achieve our ultimate goal of student learning, and we're working towards more student autonomy, getting students in the driver's seat where they have more voice and choice, they have higher engagement and more meaningful accountability, and the coaches really help provide that focus. So like we talked about, cutting out some of that clutter and really streamlining into what's the main learning. So as we went, we did gather some student data, and we just gathered it on a classroom level, not an individual student level. But as the year went on, we were really kind of wowed to see that the plan we put in place was actually coming to fruition, and the times when the coach was really closely partnering with a team on a chapter, we noticed that student data was elevated compared to some of the other chapters. And like I said before, they don't all always go in sequence chapter by chapter, so it wasn't all those at the same time. They just happened to be that chapter. And so we were really pleased and proud, a lot of positive feedback from teachers about that supportive coaching model, but also then we were thrilled to see that impact was being had on students as well. So I have said a lot. I have a lot more notes here to say, but I'm gonna turn it over. We have Missy who wrote a statement. She's not able to be here tonight, but wanted to share, and then we have Karen and Julie. So maybe I will read Missy's and then turn it over. So this is Missy Cutchell, Ben Franklin first grader, and she wanted to share that as a first grade teacher in Menominee Falls, I am happy to share how successfully our students have engaged with the new social studies curriculum this year. The Impact Social Studies curriculum has provided a clear focus, scope, and sequence that was previously missing for teachers in our district.
Our youngest learners were able to build a foundational understanding of their world through the use of this new curriculum. Throughout the school year, first graders explored essential units including civics and being a good citizen, geography and finding our physical place in the world, and economics to learn why people work. Our students also dove into history by comparing the past to the present to see how history shapes our daily lives, and wrapped up the year with a meaningful civics chapter focused on celebrating our country. Our first graders are right on track to becoming active, informed, and community-minded citizens right from the start. The smooth implementation of our new curriculum would not have been possible without the assistance of our curriculum and learning coach, Hannah Berry. She was instrumental in helping teachers understand and utilize the new framework and help create engaging extension activities that allowed students to connect with the materials in a hands-on and exciting way. We look forward to diving even more fully into the extension activities in the coming school year as we continue to get to know the curriculum on a deeper level. Thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit about our new social studies curriculum. With a year under our belts, we are looking forward to seeing student growth and understanding continue to expand.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm Karen, I teach first grade at Shady Lane, and I also piloted, but not this curriculum, so I've gotten to see both, and that's been very illuminating. But I have to agree with everything Missy put in hers, but I have to come back to your presentation, actually, I'm gonna link it to this. Because as I was looking through the framework you guys set up, it matches like the framework of what we do. You had the objectives, right, for like, how are we going to go through stuff, and then guiding questions, and then inquiry, and that's what we do with students. Even at the first grade level. So when I see that, I'm like, oh, it's great when you see examples of how what you're teaching isn't just in a vacuum, but this is how we want our students to grow and evaluate information and take in the world. And so that was just like, as I was watching that, I'm like, this is like a social studies lesson. So I love that. I think I just would like to come back and talk about the pacing guides, the instructional framework and pacing guides that you guys had set up and for us, and that is like what guides me through, guided our team, I know, through the year. So I can quickly go there, it maps out like our flex pacing schedule, but it also has your standards there. So if you're like, oh, I need something a little more engaging, you can quickly go to that pacing, I'm calling it a pacing guide, but you know it's for each chapter.
Yep.
And you can quickly go there and say, okay, these are the standards, here is what I'm going to do if I'm going to modify the lesson. Am I still meeting the standards? And that has been great. And I also have to echo what Missy said, our former instructional coach, Hannah Berry, has been essential to helping us take what we had in the curriculum and saying like, here's something you could try that's standards-based and aligned to up the engagement, because we are, I can't speak for, I can only speak for first grade, but I feel no matter what grade level you're at, you are constantly finding ways to engage students. And so that has been truly helpful. So an example of that would be in our history unit. One of the standards is, what are patterns in history that remain the same and what are patterns in history that change? And so McGraw-Hill had a great idea of like, we'll do like an artifact museum. And then as a team, we teamed up and we're like, we don't have to just show slides, we can bring in artifacts. And so bringing in like an overhead projector, we had an old shoe shining machine that the kids all thought was a microphone. So it was great, but then there's the guided inquiry, right? So at our level, we're doing more guided inquiry. Because it's 6 and we're learning the process. So like we laid out all of the objects, we didn't tell the kids anything about it. And so first they had to have discussions and write down and guess, what do you think this is? Why do you think people used it? And then coming together and revealing it and then having the talks about like, okay, a shoe shine machine might not be something you see, so that's changed, but like, you know, people buy new shoes or we clean up our shoes, right? So having those conversations, even at that level. And then my second story that kind of brings it together for me is I have my own child. My oldest child is a junior in high school in another district, and he recently took his civics exam. And so we were going through some of the questions that he was asked, and I was like, wow, these are a lot of topics, even at the first grade level, that we're exposing students to. And so like I loved our civics chapter. It was so engaging and so interesting. And you might be thinking like, well, monuments and learning about branches of government, but it was so appropriate and so fun for the students. And knowing that this is something that they're going to take part in, civic engagement, and that we're starting that at such a young level, has been really, really eye-opening and really rewarding. I think the last thing I just want to finish it with is just a wondering I'm having. Is that okay if I bring this up?
I don't know what it is.
Because we typically do 10 inquiries a year between ELA and social studies. So there's 5 chapters in each curriculum or resource, and at the end of each chapter, we're doing an inquiry project. And so I'm wondering, just in terms of like I think a goal that I would love to look at moving forward is how can we bring some of these inquiries together, and then you get more bang for your buck, right? If you're doing an inquiry project on community in both social studies and ELA, how can you bring that together and pool your resources and your primary sources and give kids a little more time to engage instead of saying, well, we have these 2 projects, how do we bring it into one? But that's a great thing, like, it's a great thing to have that. So, just something I'm wondering moving forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a good wondering. I like that wondering. I really like our social studies resource. The slide that we just saw where we looked, where we looked at a little bit of a data is impactful to me beyond belief, because looking at, and I know our grade level was the bottom 4th one. That's when our instructional coach, thank you, worked with our team and met with us on a weekly basis and organized everything for us and walked alongside us and just worked with us to create some of those engaging projects and some of those engaging activities throughout the unit. So when we took our first unit test, it was beyond scary, because I think the kids almost fainted. And then when it went home to parents, they almost fainted, because that was almost the first thing at parent-teacher conference was, well, what is this? Don't worry, we're good. So, kind of setting that aside a little bit for the first couple of chapters was amazing, and just to get on a roll and just to get some of those engagement activities, there's so many things within that resource that was sent to us or that we purchased, but we don't have all kinds of opportunities to just really dig into those. So kind of as you were talking, I was thinking, okay, how can I use some of my win time, which is some of that intervention time throughout the school year, to bring some of that in for kids instead of just, okay, do this boring worksheet, because there's some cool videos that they've got on, cool people that they've never heard of, but they know what they've done, kind of a thing. Or how the traffic light started and who invented that, and just so how can I work that into something else, which kind of goes along with what Karen said. Even some of those projects, how can we intertwine that? Even one of our 4th grade ones, we did a science one that would have been great to focus in with another curriculum within our reading. I know I'm jumping out of social studies, but one thing shocked me is when we were doing our Midwest chapter, I thought, oh my gosh, this is gonna be so boring for them. They're gonna know everything, and they didn't, which was awesome. But they had a couple, oh yeah, we went to St. Louis and saw the Arch for the soccer tournament, we went with my brother. That kind of stuff, which was amazing, and it totally made connections for them. But I cannot speak enough to that coaching that worked with our team. I mean, Angie Sardina did a great job. And in fact, we did not have her walk alongside us for Unit 6. So I think a couple of days before we were supposed to start Unit 6,
you kind of just, okay, it's coming. And, I sent a text and says, well, we're not working with Angie in Unit 6. And I think my whole team, what? What do you mean? What? Why not? That kind of thing. So I think there was just, I know they enjoyed it and they were so appreciative of the whole thing. So, and just creating some of those fun activities. And I think there's a couple of slides that are coming up, I believe some pictures. There was one, I don't wanna there we go. The Midwest Road Trip Inquiry Project, which I piloted this resource. And this is the chapter that I did with my students last year. And it was switched a little bit because they wanted you to make a poster. And my students made a poster and it was great. I think I could have let them go a whole week making the poster, but we don't have all that kinds of extra time to do that. So it was tweaked to make a slide. So they worked with a partner if they wanted to, and they could come up with a place to visit at a certain state within the Midwest. So that bottom left-hand corner picture is an example of that. So just really neat.
Do you have one of Google Slides?
Yes,
I love it.
I know. Put in a picture, find information.
Yes.
Please don't plagiarize.
Right.
Great lessons.
Yes, totally.
Very real life.
This is how you talk? No, you don't. You were amazing.
Well, and you brought your posters when we piloted.
I did.
And
I
your
did.
posters were a huge hit with the committee, and I think that's what got it
Yes.
over. I mean, everybody was supportive, but it was like Julie's enthusiasm with the posters
It
kind
was
of
fun.
really just brought it home to
Yes,
everybody.
they
So,
loved
yes,
it and they
I
loved the
appreciate that.
slides
Yes, that's awesome.
just as much. And I believe I had one group say, can we do a third? No, we don't have time, sorry. But
so many things to do.
yes, so
But they asked, and that's the
Yes.
exciting part.
yes,
Well,
yes.
and that, there's a great, when you talk about win time, there's a
Yes.
great opportunity to, sometimes you might have some intervention things you need to
Yes.
do, but you can go deeper in some of those
Mhm.
things where they're
Yes.
really interested, because there are things that they're being exposed to. This
Yes.
is what I find when I'm in the classroom. We think on the surface as grown-ups, we already know this, so
Mhm.
it feels boring.
Mhm.
They don't know it yet, so
Yes.
I think to see their
Yes.
enthusiasm for it is really fun.
And even doing some of the things that I remember I did as a pilot teacher with some of those digital vocabulary words. And again, I thought they would think this is boring, but they love moving the words into the web. And okay, let's do another one. And I didn't do that as much, but again, I've got next year to do that
Yeah.
and get
Well,
that
the
in
awesome thing about that too is like students had a choice of what they wanted people to
there.
visit.
Mhm.
And then that they really had an authentic purpose for doing that work. It wasn't like for a grade, it wasn't for Miss Zano. It was
Correct.
because I'm gonna stand up here and share with my whole
Yes.
class and maybe they'll have gone there,
Yes.
maybe they'll want to go
Yes.
there or
Yes,
so that's really a way to hugely up the engagement too with
Yes.
those choices and that purpose for learning.
yes. So it's a lot. And throwing in my view also is a lot too. So just some of those engaging activities I hope to talk.
Thank you for sharing, you've gotten me like, come
Great,
on in, I get so
great.
excited.
Yeah.
I'm excited for next year.
Yeah, for sure. And I think anytime we start something new, we talk about like when do we do formal surveys? Like we definitely don't do them, historically I've not done them in year one, at least in my experience, because I don't expect you to like it. Like it's hard, right?
Mhm.
I expect you to say like this is not working because you're just figuring it out.
Mhm.
And year two, like if we'll probably do a formal survey and hopefully you're kind of like neutral. And if you're excited about it, great. Like we're making progress. Because it is so much and it's really hard work to
Mhm.
adjust and figure out like what's gonna work, and you don't know until you try it sometimes. So it's a
Yes.
process
I agree.
to get comfortable with
Yes.
with a new resource.
Yes, I 100% agree.
Especially when we haven't had one, in a while.
For
We
sure.
really had drifted from social studies, and so I know just putting that into the
Mhm.
elementary school day.
Mhm.
We had time for science, but now balancing the two, I know has been a stretch. So it's
And a
it's-
book. I mean, we've got a
Yes.
book
Yes, we
that
do.
we
We do have a
haven't
book, and
had
yeah.
since when I first started.
So I
So
think
it's,
hopefully that
yeah.
it gives you a good starting spot.
Yes.
Good starting spot.
You're not just pulling and
Yes.
hoping for the best.
You do have another slide.
Yeah, we had a couple pictures in
sorry,
there.
let me
Oh,
go
no, it's
back.
okay. It was just in the spirit of sharing from year one, first grade economics. They had a market as a part of their inquiry project final, so a few teachers shared some photos from that. You might sell a service, you might sell a good, but then you might need to do some bartering and some trading of goods and services or trading money. So some of the work that was going on there. In kindergarten, their geography, a few pictures were shared from their community map that they built and some of the work that they were doing. And just a sample of kind of at that level, what that inquiry project guidance looked like. Multiple other teachers shared snippets of feedback, so we just put a few of those blurbs on the next slide. Just teachers sharing that they were really pleased with the fun interactive chapter, they're looking forward to next year. The students were improving, they were improving. One teacher said, I feel like I'm really teaching and the students are really learning, which isn't that what it's all about? And everyone, really feeling good with that. So these were just some snippets from the feedback that was shared along the way. A few other pictures, like Julie pointed out, from fourth grade, the Menominee Falls Timeline Project. One teacher, she was like, I have to send you this email, look at this. They were in ELA working on a poetry unit. And so they were not actually in social studies class, but her student wrote his poem about the Revolutionary War. And so it was just like, look at these cross-content connections, and even when you're not having to learn about the revolution, it's still on your mind and you're interested and as you're writing your poem, that's the content that is on your brain. And so that was just really cool cross-connection. And so our next steps, we've learned a lot this year. I think we've accomplished a lot, but we're so just like on the high that Karen and Julie just put us on, infusing that excitement. And Karen, 99% of your dreams are all coming true.
There we go, right there. That's why I stayed, I knew. That's why I
Great
came
minds
tonight.
think alike. So on the inquiry project,
Yep.
for sure.
Yep. So we did, as we worked all throughout the year, we were really consciously gathering all of that feedback that I spoke about before in that standard alignment. Because we did have a goal of streamlining our K-8 scope and sequence. And so by noticing some of those redundancies, we were like, when Karen spoke to 5 chapters, there'll actually be 4 next year. So we wanted to free up just that little bit more instructional time for a little more time to go deep rather than that idea of just covering and racing through and turning the pages. Because kids really learn, we know, when they're able to go deep in things. And so that'll be one of the shifts. And we did actually really look K-8 because our 8th grade American history and our 5th grade American history. So we were looking for those overlaps as well. So we really did look at a K-8. So we do have some shifts in our year-long pacing. We really worked strategically with grade level leads to align our ELA and social studies and science units so that we could have those cross-content inquiry projects. Because we do have a knowledge building ELA curriculum, and there is a lot of overlap to social studies and also science, which isn't tonight, but there is. And so we've been looking for those intentional pairings, and then we're really strategic on our pacing that those fell within like the same week or the same chunk of time. So exactly as Karen said, like instead of doing this here and that there, let's go deeper and allow kids not just the 2 days on their slide, but now we can free up, they might have 4 of those instructional blocks to work on it and really go deeper and make more of those connections.
First grade ELA starts with neighborhoods, and I feel like that works really well with building your
Yeah.
city, so
Yeah.
it's, we've got examples
And
of
it's
both.
really adjusting more of the science and social studies pieces because they're a little more interchangeable than ELA, which is definitely a progression of skills
Yes.
that build on each other, so.
Yep. Where our social studies chapter, you could do chapter 3
Yes.
first, it does not sequentially build, they're different.
hard to do long vowels before you've done short vowels, and some of those progression pieces,
The revised assessments that we talked about, so we'll really be utilizing, we did get more feedback, so we're making those updates and revisions over the summer, and we'll have kind of the phase 2 next year. So monitoring student learning, that's always at the forefront, so we'll continue to see how they're doing. Put together a year 2 implementation plan so that there's a clear plan, everyone's on the same page of knowing what's happening or when or what's expected. And year 1 with the coaching plan sounded really like it went well, and so we're gonna continue with that supportive structure. And then we did put together an observation tool and piloted with the grade level leads and made many revisions and updates along the way. But that was really great too, and opened up a lot of nice conversations and feedback and collaboration and next steps. So it really was a nice inroad to even more working together. And so we're just aiming to have that continued support throughout next year. So that's where we kind of were in the past to get to where we were this year, and a lot about what we did this year and our plans for the future. So that's that. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you, I appreciate you guys.
Thank
Yes.
We appreciate your enthusiasm and
Projects.
It was very much, it was fun. A lot more fun than
I agree that I thought it was gonna be.
I thought they would know things, like you said, or we're gonna be sitting, no, it was lots of enthusiasm.
And even teaching them how to keep a book. So you're not breaking it.
Thank you. Our budget
I mean,
appreciates
I
that.
wasn't 100%
It is
successful,
a
but
skill and process, right?
because they've not had a book.
That was in Karen's history lesson. What do you think this is used for?
The 1900s,
Yes.
right?
Yeah,
It was
We
from the
don't have to
1900s.
swipe.
Yep,
Yeah, there's no swiping.
Yep.
Yes,
might
yeah.
teach them how to do the paper bag covers.
Ooh.
Yeah, there you go.
That would be a great history lesson.
That's, I was gonna say, that's a blast from the past, yeah, it's been a while since I've done that, that's awesome. So, any questions for anybody?
Just a real general one, I hear the term inquiries, can you tell me anyone what that refers to, what does inquiry mean?
Just wanna give an example of an inquiry.
I see there's something on this last page here, it sounds like, is it like going outside the textbook, or just checking for understanding,
Kind of using it, putting it all together. Like you're working on your learning throughout the whole entire unit, and then just kind of taking that and putting it together. Like in the Midwest project, the inquiry project that was done, we learned about a lot of different places and a lot of different states within that unit.
Okay.
And then let's put some of that together and make a slideshow about a state and then places within that state.
So it's kind of like independent of the textbook. Kind
It takes the learning and then we kind of, you apply it in a new way.
There's a good
Apply
word.
it.
Really applying it
Yes,
in a new
yes.
way, so take all the information you learned and then I'm gonna go deeper here. There's a project in one of the grade levels, I think it's 4th grade, where they do like a travel brochure in ELA, and so they're, they're taking some different information and skills that they learn and then they're applying it to a product usually.
And because all of the chapters begin with like this essential question, that question launches and kind of frames the learning that you're then doing all throughout the chapter, and then you culminate. So all along the way, you're kind of gathering bits and pieces of an answer to that question, and then you ultimately compile all of that into like your project. So I just quickly pulled up one, like this 3rd grade chapter is what makes a community unique? It's one of their chapter essential questions. And then they ultimately choose 3 cultures to investigate and how people express their culture. So this is where students bring in their own choice of which ones are you going to investigate? How do you want to present that? Are you going to put it on a slide? Are you going to make that poster? So it opens up opportunities for them to then
answer that question in their way. And that slide you mentioned on the end with the types of inquiry, it could be from one end of like the really structured inquiry, like Karen kind of was speaking about, where like in first grade, we're kind of like, we're walking through this together. It's a very, she's kind of keeping them in the nest and we're going through the project. All the way to like the other end of free inquiry, where students choose the topics, they don't have any prescribed method, they kind of go completely, how can you answer this question and demonstrate your learning from this chapter? So there's like the range, and we really just liked the graphic and the way of thinking of like the pool and swimming. It really kind of resonated with us as we think about the exact same project could go through any of those phases of inquiry, or different groups or different, so.
And we're really getting to the secondary where it's not just projects, like the inquiry standards are their priority standards in social studies, and they are building it into all their lessons as well as projects too.
There are inquiry standards too, so it is a part of the state
Can I just-
standards as well.
I get really excited talking about this stuff, but I also think too, when we're talking about like inquiry and where we're going with that, I do think like it's an opportunity again for our learners to access or show their learning in more than just one way. So like when we do our assessments, our end of unit assessments are typically paper and pencil, right? Or they're digital, right? But also for kids that might not be their main way or their way to access or show their learning, I think a performance-based assessment, like an inquiry project, gives you another opportunity to show your learning besides just a paper and pencil test. It's just another opportunity.
And a perfect platform for those speaking and listening students.
Yes.
That
Get them all. In elementary, you love when things cross, cause you're teaching everything, so check.
Yep.
I have a question about on this slide, about the observations. Is that done by coaches, by peers, by?
This year, I was the one who did the observations in the grade level leads classrooms. And so it was just limited to that as we were, this was April,
I was gonna say it was
maybe?
April, I think
So it
we
was
started
towards
it in
the end
March.
of the year, we shared out kind of what those look fors or the components would be, got some feedback, went in, gave it a try. I had to laugh to Amy, I said, every time I go in, I come back and I'm like, 5 more edits, 3 more changes, you know,
Every week
because
when I meet, we had a new version to look at and
it
talk
looks
about
one
and,
way on
yeah.
paper, but then like, how does this really work when you're in a classroom? And then, sometimes teachers were like, thanks for this is really helpful. Other teachers said like, hey, can we meet, which was the best, because then they could give some feedback too. And so at this point, it was just myself doing those in the leads classrooms as kind of a pilot.
There's an opportunity to decide like what makes the most sense, what's gonna be the most helpful, as for teachers, is it them observing each other to see, social studies and using that as a guiding framework, is it,
But not at
Principals
all
learning research
attached to
more? No,
evaluation, not at all
not at all.
linked to that. It was really like, we're in year 1 and how is it really working in the classroom?
It's fun to watch you go through that process too, like, getting better every time with your own application.
Well, yeah, I was gonna make it a Google form right from the bat. And Amy's like, well, maybe just try it first. I had to come back to her, after some weeks and say, well, good thing I didn't make the Google form because the doc was much easier to update with each my new
Someday you can
reiteration.
automate it if you want to, but yeah, how we use that, I think moving forward will be dependent on what the need is, but it's good to have. Other questions?
No, I don't. I really appreciate hearing from you both and like the energy, the feeling. It was made very clear that it appears to be a very positive implementation for year 1. So
Yep.
That's awesome.
It's just gonna get better.
Cool.
Thank you. You are welcome to stay, but you're also free.
You're welcome to go.
Start summer break.
Yeah. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
See you. Have a good night, ladies. too. See you in August.
Okay.
Is this your umbrella?
Oh.
No, it's mine.
Okay. Alright, so we're gonna jump into secondary, which as is typical, probably a little less colorful, and fewer pictures of projects. So we're gonna talk about six through 8 and then 9 through 12, and they have 2 different resources that they're working with, and they are in year 2. So they've had a chance to go through year 1 and now are moving out of year 2 where they maybe did a little bit more refining and now really trying to get to a place of in year 3 really solidifying some different things. I know in conversation that we've had, a couple of things have come up that I just wanted to throw out there from the very beginning. When these resources were adopted, both at middle school and at high school, there was a chapter that was not approved in each of those resources. And in talking with teachers, I think at the high school especially, they would be interested in revisiting that chapter if the committee is interested in doing that, and I would be supportive of that as well. At the middle school level, they are certainly interested in having that chapter revisited, but they did tell me that they don't see it fitting into their current kind of program within their what they already have. So they would welcome it, but didn't have a place for it. Right now, it's kind of at the end. I think the quote was, didn't feel it really fits with the course. It's kind of an end of text add-on that connects history to the present day. And so they've already had to work hard to cover what they already have. So just as an FYI, that's kind of where what their feedback was. So I wanted to make sure you had that just from the front, because I know those are things that are going to come up and have come up, and so I wanted to make sure that you had that information as well.
What was that excluded section you mentioned?
The was chapter 11 out of let's see, I've got it written down here, out of the world history, so it's Great Civilizations, unit 11, and then at high school it was topic 20, America in the 21st century.
In some cases, have the teachers kind of like say worked around its absence? It kind of
I
sounded
think
like
at the
maybe
high
that's-
school, yes, not so much at the middle school.
Okay.
I think because I think they got plenty of content, felt comfortable with what they were teaching, met their standards, et cetera.
It'd be worth revisiting either way, just to have that option open to teachers, whether they are able to get to that content or not.
Yes, and they would welcome that. I just wanted to be honest in the feedback they gave me, that they're like, I don't know that we'd still be able to use it, but certainly having everything open allows them that opportunity.
What does the normal new curriculum review process look like?
And for if we brought those chapters forward now, or just the process that we
Well, when you
went through?
get new materials,
Mhm.
like I understand we did, I know it's a complicated process to bring in new curriculum, but just briefly, what is the policy for saying, okay, we're gonna buy these textbooks? Do they go through further review typically before they're introduced into the?
After they're purchased? Yes, and I
I
think
think it's similar to like the
Lynn-
Yeah, I was
pilot
just gonna
process.
say.
Yeah,
They
Lynn's
explain-
got a
Lynn,
slide here, she'll
yeah.
talk about it a little
Maybe I'll
bit too,
answer
so
some.
that
Yeah.
might.
Pilot process?
So,
Yeah.
yes, so there's actually a district pilot process, and I was going to say, Nina and I worked very carefully to make it very much a K-12, as consistent as possible. However, there are some significant differences, being the fact that the social studies at the elementary impacts every teacher in elementary, where at the secondary level, we have 8 teachers that teach, they're content experts in social studies, and then same at the high school, we have the 8 teachers that are content experts in social studies. So when we do the work at the secondary level, we really partner very closely with the curriculum chairs at those grades. And so everything that was done throughout this process, they have been like very significant part of conversations and bringing it to their teams. And so when Nina went through all those different stages that she did at the beginning of her slide about the pilots, et cetera, and all of that, that was all done at the secondary level as well. So we came to the board, like, just like we did now, and shared all of that back then. So I just did a little recap here of, we reviewed the standards, did benchmarking with other districts, compared, like what other districts are doing, identified vendors. We did surveys with parents, staff, and students, to find out what they wanted in a resource. We finalized that, determined what those, resources were, did the pilot, and once the pilots, during the pilots, we did surveys, just like what Nina was saying at the elementary, because two teachers piloted this one and two other teachers piloted this one. And so then we gathered that information, and we had a whole scoring system and a rubric, et cetera, and then it came up, and I'll show you that on one of the future slides too.
Yeah, so I think one of the big differences, we use the same process at elementary. There are teacher representatives who really dive in deeply and participate, whereas at secondary, it's just
the full team.
It's a full team because there are just fewer teachers to navigate with, so.
So on the next slide, so I met with Lindsay Smallwood, by the way, and Jeff Stonwork are the two curriculum chairs, and they apologize for not being able to be here, but they did both give statements tonight. Jeff is for the middle school and Lindsay is for the high school. And I did meet with them prior to doing the creating the survey. We looked it over before it went out. 6 teachers out of 8 in each building completed the survey. And then I went over the results with them, and you have a packet, like a handout with all that, so I kind of summarized things more for our presentation here. But they wanted you to know that this is what their departments came up with during the pilot, before the piloting process, and of what they were looking for in a resource prior to having the vendors come in. So this is what they wanted to know for that. And we did have a section like for what parents were looking for, as I said, and what students were looking for, but, alright. So then this just shows you that we ended up having 5 vendors come in for the middle school, and then we had, and this was not this last year, this was the year before again, and we had 4 vendors come in for the high school. And I'll be honest, the top vendor for North was McGraw-Hill and Nat Geo, and the high school was McGraw-Hill and Savas. And I honestly thought, before they did the pilots, that they were going to choose McGraw-Hill. And interestingly enough, the teachers at the middle school ended up going with Nat Geo, and the teachers at the high school chose Savas.
And really, I think in elementary, what we thought maybe
Yeah.
to go with,
Ended
based
up
on
not being-
initial, once you really use
Dig
it day
into
in
it.
and day out, yeah.
And that's
So-
why we continue to really value that piloting process, to make sure that we have a chance to use it. It's never exactly the same as having it in your classroom day after day, but it does give us the best opportunity to really get a sense of what we're purchasing before we purchase it.
So once it was chosen, the teachers did have paid time over the summer, where they dug into the resources and partners and really worked on bringing clarity to the unit of instructions, created a common, guaranteed, and viable curriculum by working in collaboration with each other. And you can see the example of a UBD there. That was the form that they reused, that those are now online, visible up to a certain stage for transparency to parents as well.
And that goes back to what I talked about a little bit with the strategic plan and the scorecard earlier this week at the board meeting, that there was a request from the board as a part of the strategic plan to make curricular resources more accessible. And so the way we did that, and hopefully in a way that then helped teachers to work collaboratively and have kind of common experiences across classrooms, we use this understanding by design form, which really, that process really starts with the end in mind. What is it you want students to know, and how are you going to help them get there?
Regarding your question about the inquiry, you can see on there, the second part is the essential question, and then if you look down under the standards, you'll see one of the first sections there are the inquiry standards. And so the essential questions at both buildings is visible and posted in the rooms or on a slide or somewhere. That is kind of that overarching question that carries them throughout their entire unit. So,
Good.
alright.
Great, thanks.
So then I'm gonna go into the survey results at the end of year 2. So for 6th grade, again, it was Nat Geo. And so I picked out a few key slides to just highlight here and then summarize some, but you have all the different ones there. So for each of the two buildings, they were asked what was the most effective for student engagement. And you can see at the middle school, there was pretty much the highest was the photos, images, and the visual media that was provided by the resource. The active learning and discussion, Jeff shared that was really key too. A little bit less, but still used with interactive maps. And then the document-based questions that's provided. And then for the assessment question, how well did the formative and summative assessment data inform your day-to-day instruction? And you're gonna notice a difference from middle school to high school on this one. Here in the middle school, it's very tight and to the right, which is the way you want it, right? You want the formative assessments to be able to be used to then make adjustments in their teaching to meet the needs of that specific class. And as well as the assessment to summative assessments to be able to know that the students truly mastered the material. So at the middle school, that was a very strong high score for that. So just again, you have all this feedback when you keep going, but so I just did a summary slide here. So overall at the middle school, 100% of the teachers did say they do modify lessons and they do it more just to increase the relevance. Some of them do it more to tighten it to make sure it's truly aligned with the Wisconsin standards. So they're very focused on making sure they're hitting the priority standards that they've chosen. The resource aligns clearly with the inquiry standards. They did share they have trouble with integrating the career readiness. Jeff spoke to the civics part of that. He said it's taught more in 8th grade than it is in 6th and 7th. So the score would have been lower by the 6th and 7th grade teachers, but he felt that in the 8th grade that was strong there. 73% of instructional staff felt proficient at a 4 or 5 of using the digital platform. And overall satisfaction was a little split with 2 teachers rating it a 2 and the other one's rating it 4 out of 5. And Jeff said, I'm gonna check into that. So I don't know, he never got back to me on why that split was a little bit there. So I'm actually gonna, before I slide to the next one, I'm gonna read Jeff's statement to you. North staff is 2 years into our curriculum implementation and adoption of the National Geographic textbook resource at grades 7 and 8, and ending the first year with a freshly revised 6th grade textbook. Overall, we are pleased with the usability of it as our base resource with manageable section lesson sizes and ideas for short hands-on activities. Thinking beyond the textbook, development of the unit UBD framework was a huge lift, but has been crucial to the curriculum revision process. It has provided a solid anchor for regular weekly grade level PLC discussions. These help to effectively planning and implementing common teaching strategies, activities, and formative and summative assessments. This is as tight of planning and assessment alignment among grade level teachers as I have seen in 30 years. That said, teachers are still finding the flexibility to build in extension lessons and activities and quality supplemental articles to extend and deepen learning through the supplemental materials process when it would be best practice to meet student needs. An example would be articles on Wisconsin's spearfishing rights and tribal sovereignty used during a Socratic seminar, or to meet state standards or state acts not covered by the generic national level textbook, such as the Act 31 requirements for Wisconsin Native American Studies. Our goal for next year is to continue to get better at using the PDSA process during our PLC time, to analyze formative assessment data, adjusting instructional practices as needed, and identifying coaching opportunities around high-yield instructional strategies. So overall, they are in a really good place at the middle school with this. They are so tight, and we did walkthroughs over the last 2 years as well. And at the secondary level, it was through coaches, myself, at principals and APs. And just quick walkthrough checks, and the essential questions were consistently utilized. I could go from that guaranteed and viable curriculum at the middle school, you can go from one room to another, and they really lesson plan together and are thoughtful, and there's, I must say what squares yet, but.
Yeah, well, and I think from what I hear from Jeff, they have really appreciated that, because nobody's the teacher that's really hard or really easy, like they're on the same page with what they're doing. They're still making those modifications when they need to and supporting each other in that work, which I think you can see it in the results. So.
Right, and then I'll move on to the high school, and then you might have some questions after this one. So the high school chose Savvis, and I'm gonna share all this, but I'm just gonna preface it with Lindsay Smallwood said, I would still pick Savvis again if I had the choice, but you are gonna see some areas where we need to do, I think, a little bit more growth with some things. So the first slide, you can see here that out of the 6 teachers, they didn't all fill this in, aware that student engagement. So the teachers, I think, at the high school are kind of feeling that the Savvis wasn't providing as much engagement for the students as they had anticipated. You notice that Project Imagine, we were super excited, and that was one of the things that really, I think, sold the teachers on wanting during the pilot to get the Savvis was that immersion activities. And they're like these interactive immersion activities, but the teachers, as they dug into them, were not finding them as strong and as useful as they thought. So that was one area. The next one, you can see here again that the assessment information is spread out a little bit more here, which they're one of their goals, and you'll see this when we get to our next steps. They want to dig deeper into the assessment data, and I thought I heard you say that at elementary too, that they were gonna be looking at the assessments as well from the resource. Is
Yeah,
that
that was
similar?
a big part of our work this year.
Okay,
Yeah.
yep, so they want to dig into that a little bit more in teams. One of the biggest differences, just so you know, from middle school to high school, is the middle school teachers have had a common planning time all along, and they teach that one subject all day long, the same course. Where at the high school, they teach 2 or 3 different courses, and they don't have every day a common planning time, and until Dan Gebauer, the principal, has that set up for them for next year, and they're very excited about that. So that will be a game changer, I think, for them to be able to have that time together. So then, as an overall summary, you can see that the inconsistent standards alignment, it really spread out, just like we saw for the assessments. Their scores were kind of between 2s and 5s for that one. The digital platform, they felt the stronger than even the middle school, that 83% of them felt very strong that they were able to manipulate and use the digital platform easily. They have a class set of textbooks in the room as well as the electronic version for the students. And so when I'll be in the classrooms, they do use the textbooks in class quite a bit as well. And then a third of them reported again, only a third of them reported that again that the assessments were informing their daily lessons. So that's something they're gonna be looking into. And then you'll notice the same similar scoring about the career readiness. And so that they said the same thing, the government class covers that heavily and the other ones maybe not as much. So that's why that score would be a little different for the civics part. But we'll talk a little bit about what that career readiness piece. So.
And that really connects to what we talked about at our last meeting with the education for employment plan and making sure that we're being thoughtful about how we're making those connections for kids.
So I'm gonna read Lindsay Smallwood's statement, and so she said, the implementation of Savvis in the social studies department has brought both benefits and challenges. One advantage of having a textbook is a consistent foundation to anchor our planning and instruction. Additionally, we have observed growth in skill and confidence in students' ability to navigate complex texts with the use of Savvis resources. Looking ahead, we're excited to use common planning time next year to evaluate our assessments, especially summative, to ensure the assessments are accurately measuring students' learning and relation to Wisconsin standards. At the same time, the department continues to experience concerns regarding the expectations to rely almost exclusively on Savvis resources. The content and resources provided by Savvis are valuable instructional tools, but they do not constitute a comprehensive curriculum on their own. The emphasis from the district to exclusively use Savvis and the supplemental materials approval process has limited the department's ability to incorporate additional resources that enhance student learning. Effective social studies instruction requires students to engage with a variety of primary and secondary sources, many of which are not included in a single textbook. Additionally, students benefit from learning experiences and activities outside of a textbook that help connect historical concepts to real-world issues and relevant applications. We believe a more flexible approach to resource selection is essential for providing teachers with the autonomy to design engaging learning experiences that foster critical thinking and develop informed, civically engaged citizens. We would be happy to continue this conversation with any members of the school board who are interested in additional clarification or more information. Thank you, the Menominee Falls High School Social Studies Department. So I talked to Lindsay to make sure I wanted to represent her statement there well, and she said it was fair for me to share that when they speak about the supplemental materials approval process, several years back, I don't know the exact date, Amy, there was a board policy put in place that, and teachers were grandfathered into just using what they were using until they went through the new curriculum renewal process. And then once they did, if they want to bring in a resource, a supplemental resource, then they fill out this form and then their principal approves it or not, but they mostly were approved. And so you will see that like on their UBDs, they have supplemental resources, but I think that they felt hindered from using as many as they maybe had in the past. So that they were wondering about that policy.
And that would be the other thing that I would bring forward, and we had a chance to talk a little bit about that I think the opportunity to look at that maybe a little bit differently is something that I hear teachers asking for, in terms of like how to make it as simple as possible, or how to provide the opportunities for them to continue to branch out and make sure that they're meeting their standards in different ways and engaging students in different ways.
And when we rolled out the Sabbath for the first year, when you want to do it to fidelity the first year, and that year was used so that, because they had for decades teacher created lessons. And so this was a really, consistent resource. But then by year 2, this year, we talked about using it to integrity, being able to make those educational decisions on their own of what's working and what's not working. And Jeff shared that at the middle school, they felt really strong that they've been able to do that. And I think without having that common planning time at the high school, it was harder for them to make those decisions because they weren't having the time with each other as much. And so I do think that if you look now then to our plan, the common course like planning time is what their goal is to be able to go back through the and really focus heavily, starting with the summative assessments. And then, but then for both buildings, they're just, you heard in Jeff's and in Lindsay's, that they're going to use that time to refine and enrich their lessons. And then this is the best part. Remember the last time I was here and Lisa Kiefer brought to you the E4E plan? And in that plan, they talked about having some professional learning on how to connect career readiness. And both surveys showed they were struggling with how to connect career readiness. So they're going to build that they're going to take their learning from that and build that into their lesson planning as well. So it's kind of a win-win there.
What's the name of the policy regarding supplemental materials?
Yes, it is well, and now it's changing with Neola's.
Yeah.
I believe it's 361
Okay.
is the policy number. So.
Was or is the new one?
It was, yeah,
It currently is.
21.
25, 21?
Might be the new one.
Okay.
Don't hold me to that 100%.
And if I didn't say it, I have to give a huge shout out to Jeff Solomon and Lindsay Small, because over the last 2 years, they have really led their teams so well, and they are models for like the work that they've done. They've just really dug into this. They were positives in spirit, and it was a joy. So I just want to give them a shout out.
Yeah, absolutely. I would echo that. They've done good work. We had the opportunity when we first purchased these resources, when we were first looking at these resources, we had the last of the ESSER money to use, which was great to be able to do that, but it had a time frame on it, an expiration date, and so we had to move pretty quickly through this process. So they were troopers in doing that and bringing their teams along and really dedicated time to investing in determining what resource would be best. And so they've done a really, really nice job. It is hard work to switch your type of teaching or the resources you're using, and so kudos to the whole team for their work on that.
Have coaches, we heard so much about coaching in the elementary presentation?
It's a little more challenging. We have one curriculum learning coach between middle school and high school, but we have all the departments for that, with that coach. So it's just a little different, but she, Laura Fowle is our current coach, and she really dug deep into sixth grade this year. They were like a year one with the resource, and so she really dug in and supported and worked with them, and I think they would give her a shout out as well.
And I'm glad you brought that up, your resource, hang on for just a second, year one of sixth grade. So when we purchased the National Geographic resource, we knew that their sixth grade program was undergoing a renewal and was going to be ready the next year. And so we were able to get their current books for sixth grade that they used for 1 year, and then we got the new books the next year. So sixth grade is now up to date. But that just took a little bit longer. Textbook companies, unfortunately, sometimes don't work on our schedules, so.
But the CLC really partners with the curriculum, the chair, and so that's where it's secondary, it's a little bit different of an experience, but that's really goes hand in hand, where we work really closely with the chairs and the coach.
And Lynn was the coach
I was the
going through
coach
this process.
during the first part of this, and then now in this role. So I went through all this,
heavily-
that's why I know how, it was just, I'm really close to them all.
And was heavily involved in both shepherding the process, collaborating with the chair, and
I get emotional if I talk about it, because they're just great people.
Yeah.
Yep.
There's definitely, I don't know if I say some worries when I look at this as far as across both National Geographic and Savvis, it looks like, the biggest modifications is about increasing student engagement and relevance. And so first I just wanna offer that as a noticing of wondering, what is missing, and maybe it is this they wanna bring in those supplemental materials in order to do that,
And that's
but
what, Lindsay said to me, she goes, I still would pick this one, but out of what's out there to choose from, this was what they thought was the strongest choice, so.
that is a question I was gonna say, was it just out of the options they had, or was it this is
Well,
the best of what we had?
we looked at all the choices
Okay.
out there, we brought them, it was a
Okay.
whole, it was year-long process of having
Okay.
the pilot, the surveys, the vendors come in, the whole team for each building was involved in all those parts.
Right,
and they drove it. They were the
Like I said, I thought it was gonna be McGraw Hill, so.
and the ones who came and brought the recommendation, this is what we're looking for, so.
I think what you said though, I feel like the middle school's in a really good spot, I feel like the high school this next year in year 3, every implementation's a little different, I do think that them having that time together to really make those tweaks and stuff, I feel like will be a really good spot.
And I think any flexibility we can provide them and mindfully bringing in additional pieces could be really helpful, because no textbook
And appreciate it.
is the be all end all,
I can't, yeah.
right? It is, but it can be a solid starting spot, and then you can go from there.
Yeah, it's such a juxtaposition right now of the feeling of elementary social studies, and then it's
Maybe it's my tone, I'll be happy.
Well, I can just see from the survey results that it seems like the student engagement piece is what the professionals are wanting, right? Because they're with the students in front of them, and ultimately it's the students learning, and if they're not fully engaged or having difficulty engaging with the curriculum, I'm not saying things aren't moving in that direction, but I hear it, I guess, is what I'm saying from looking at the survey results, that something needs to be done with student engagement.
I think as we look across the system, elementary students engage a little differently in general to middle school or high school students at times, right?
Sure.
It's just, little ones, it's all brand new to them, right? And then as they get older, they have more competing interests for their time, so.
And I think just to add in as a disciplinary literacy kind of component to this, I think the part when we look at student engagement generally, we also want to think about what does that mean for kids in high school and those opportunities to connect with outside pieces. 80 minutes is a large amount of time to keep kids engaged in things in social studies, and I really do think what Lynn said about that common and course-alike planning hasn't allowed teachers to come up with those really key ideas to talk with each other, to really look at what the resource might provide through those like project immersive activities of like, how do we adjust that? And I think both with coaching, but also with just having the time to collaborate and problem solve through what's getting in the way for kids from that engagement level is definitely, because you're right, it is something worth noting. The and to that is what does engagement look like for high schoolers? Because they're not gonna get jazzed about a city project unless they're
They might.
They might. It might be like a utopian and some very Thomas More, but who knows? Like there's opportunities. I just don't. I'm wondering, and Lynn would know more, but I think there is. What does that look like for having that common planning time to get through to thought partner with my people, my content people, to really jazz it up, if you will.
I'm really excited to see what the high school can do with that common planning time, and how we can support them in kind of those tweaks.
And I think they're hard I think the secondary teachers are kind of hard on themselves. I would pop into different rooms when kids are engaged and there's great learning going on, so.
That's a fair point too.
I think a few years from now also, I will be excited to see where we're at when like students are engaging in reading and writing and thinking about these concepts from earlier ages, you know, where like, I know I was in a 4th grade teacher's class and she's like, oh my gosh, Nina, like, we're supposed to be teaching this, but like, they have no clue of this, and I'm like, I know, it's like you're jumping in at 4th grade where they really haven't had some of those 3rd grade, 2nd grade, 1st grade, kindergarten that they're bringing with, they're kind of starting fresh, and so I can only imagine when you're in high school, like I think someone spoke to like, you know, even just the reading of those complex texts and all of the vocabulary that goes into it, like I can really grow and be more engaged when I'm knowing what I'm learning about, and so I think it's hard to be patient, but I do have to really believe that like what's happening in elementary and middle is going to continue to filter up to high school, and that'll impact students' ability to engage deeper with the content.
Well, as I think one of the things that high school had talked about was the reading skills. They've definitely seen improvement in reading skills and how that's impacting social studies, and that will help with engagement as well.
Also keep in mind that the high school is our highest performing building.
Yes.
And with respect
Our
to
students do very well.
all data points, just big picture.
We'll just
Continue on.
push it up higher.
Absolutely,
Yes.
always.
And I think that's part of the hard part right now with, we have some internal data that we can't share publicly, but we have seen some good growth in social studies. So I guess, can I say that?
Oh, absolutely, I mean, we know because
Just
the
I can't
data's
share any more than that yet,
embargoed,
but
so I
yeah.
mean,
Right,
I understand and respect the feedback about engagement, but the hard data points are important, they're embargoed right now, but we'll be setting our goals based on those data points.
Yeah, so we're seeing growth, and I just expect more as, like Nina said, just as students get exposed to more concepts and that start seeing those spiral through their social studies experience overall. So, but there's continued work to do, for sure, especially with the high school and the middle school. And elementary, the job is never done. I think that's Becky's smiling at me knowing that you just finished your last day of school, but the job is never done.
And I do want to reiterate that they are using supplemental resources, and like Jeff Stollenberg said, they just felt that form, they didn't think anything of it. But at the high school, that was more of a pain point for them, but they still were doing supplemental resources. I think it felt more controlled to them versus being able to have that autonomy and professionalism to make those decisions.
I respect that perspective.
I'm just trying to be their voice and share.
Yeah,
you know,
for sure.
Like you said, if
That's
it's, you know.
Yes, that is definitely, like I said, that is definitely a point that I think teachers would appreciate us revisiting if that was the will of the committee and the board.
Do you feel that sentiment reaches across other content area teachers as well in your experience with working with those teachers? I'm a math teacher. I doubt we're using many
I was gonna say,
different
I think it depends a little bit.
So I
Yeah,
understand in different content areas it might be a sticking point.
For sure.
In social studies, commerce, where you're pulling different materials up.
It is more of a piece. I think the other piece is when that policy was enacted, one of the things we talked about was we weren't going to go back and try, because we had so many curricular areas that hadn't been touched in a few years. And so they were just using the curriculum they were using. We were not gonna go back and try to put through that approval process all of those supplemental materials. But as we did new curricular areas, then the resource would be the base, and anything additional for policy then you would bring through the process. And so social studies and ELA were the first two groups that went through that process.
Right.
So they're the ones that have really been impacted by this at this point in time. And of course, they're the two areas that are most likely to bring in those resources. So I think that
And
adds
it
to
was
that
done
pain point
quicker
piece.
and,
And
yeah.
so I think that adds to that pain point piece, for sure. So others haven't had that experience yet.
Well, I feel like looking at the survey and from hearing the statements, it seems like some flexibility for autonomy that is needed.
Yes, I think that would be very much appreciated. So I think the two pieces, the potentially bringing back those individual chapters for seventh grade and high school, and then the supplemental materials.
And those could be something that we could revisit at another.
For sure, we could add that as an action item to a future meeting. And I can offer you those resources to review if you would like. We can get you access to those if you'd like to see them yourselves.
Flexibility, Hallie, were you referring to the supplemental material issue?
I just heard in both the statements them saying they needed flexibility for their autonomy, and I feel like, yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
I guess when I'm saying that, like, from my own experience as a teacher, it sounds like the start of the implementation felt maybe more rigid and controlled and maybe hindered their ability to feel like they could use their own professionalism through the implementation.
And I think good teaching changes day by day as you get formative feedback. And so the process of having to fill out a form and wait to get approved, sometimes I think can feel hindering. That you're wanting to use something and having to wait through this process.
And just so you know, it is common practice to try to do that first year of it, using the resource as much in fidelity to the way it was intended. And that was, I think, what we tried, but then by year two, really give that more of that autonomy. And it doesn't mean you don't have it. They were told from the very beginning, if something is obviously not right, then you discuss it, we figure it out, and you go with what is right for kids always first, right? But perception, yeah.
Well, and that policy, I think, supplemental materials was enacted in August of 24, if I remember correctly, so shortly after these pieces were adopted, so they did coincide. So.
A message was sent, perhaps. Okay,
Any other questions?
I don't do.
I'm good.
Alright.
Okay, we'll move on to the next.
Yes, we're gonna
English
switch
language
gears a little bit, and now we're gonna look at things K-12, so for K-12. This is Sarah Rasparelli. I don't know if everybody's had a chance to meet Sarah, and she is new to our district this year. This is her second, I think, visit to the committee, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
And we asked her to do a summary of 4K through 12 literacy. So I'll let her get started and then I'll jump in maybe in a couple places. But, just in, as one thing that again might come up is with the adoption of, we're in year 2 of a 5K through 12th grade literacy adoption. And I don't know if it'll come up in your slides or not, but I had a note about a chapter in sixth grade English language arts that in their resource that was not approved for adoption. And we talked about that a little bit.
Coming of age chapter.
Yes, there's a chapter 1 of sixth grade that had not been adopted, and the team would be interested in using parts of it if possible. Perhaps using the unit, but they would not anticipate using it this next school year because they're kind of planned for the year. They need some time definitely to dig in and work on that. We did a little bit of work at the time, but really they would need some time, and typically we would offer them some summer work hours if they wanted that, so potentially a little bit of release time during the school year. That can be hard because you have to make sub-plans and you're not with your kids and those kinds of things, but those, they would also perhaps have some early release day time to work on that. But just an update on that, I wanted to make sure I didn't forget to talk about that.
Well, hello. So what you have in front of you, and kind of you have a bigger packet. You have both results from both the high school and elementary surveys, but more than anything, kind of just anchoring where we're at. So the School District of Menominee Falls literacy journey started around 2021, 2022. I was not here, but this is what I've been shared and did my best to kind of give you a visual timeline, because the nice, or take it depending on who you ask, there has been legislature that has an impact on our literacy work. And so through the audit and prioritization and development of an early literacy plan, which happened in 21-22, around 2022-23, there was this continued prioritization around early literacy. And then we started to complete that intermediate literacy audit. And then, 2023, here we have Act 20, which really put early literacy at the front, and the focus on that 4K to third grade. Well, what does Menominee Falls do? Well, we adopt a K-12 early or ELA curriculum and start that review process. It's the similar process. Nina was a big part of it going in, Amy, that everyone has shared around the curricular review process. So all of that, I will let them speak to those questions because again,
It's the same process.
same process. But then by the end of that, they had pilot teachers, they piloted Benchmark, and at the elementary as well as Savis, and then at the high school, I don't know what they
HMH.
Okay,
I
HMH.
feel like they had 3. HMH, something and Sabbath.
Oh yeah, the bound, a very bland one, I know which one it is.
Was it Study Sync?
Study Sync.
Study Sync, okay.
Yes, that is the very bland one. So, with those pilots, yeah, that's fine. So then we adopted Savis and here we are. As I said, 2023 resulted in some new general requirements per the law. And Act 20 has required every school district to have a science-aligned literacy curriculum and instruction. We responded by adopting my view and my perspectives. Districts were required for teacher leadership and training. So with that, we've done that K-12 through Cox Campus and then some disciplinary literacy work through CISA 6. We really started to focus in on assessment using screeners and diagnostics. Those include AIMSWeb and FastBridge. AIMSWeb is the screener under the law of Act 20 that the state has chosen, and FastBridge is our progress monitoring tool. With Act 20, we were required to develop personal reading plans. These personal reading plans have also kind of impacted how we use our interventions and supporting our students who struggle over time, or what we need to do to best meet the needs of students. And then we built the early literacy remediation plan through looking at it from our universal instructions and identifying our tiered supports.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So AIMSWeb is what Act 20 requires.
Correct.
Is FastBridge the district's?
FastBridge is a progress monitoring tool. So students who have a personal reading plan or any type of intervention plan have a task to be monitored to see if they're making goals. That's the same with students who have IEPs. So you're trying to monitor progress using a norm referenced or like national test. Sometimes IEPs are done through individual or observational data. The choice for literacy, we look at it and connect it to some of what Ames Web offers, so like an oral reading fluency test is part of our kind of screener piece. And then creating an oral reading fluency test through different components at early grades help us see how that works. A lot of our research is backed into that kind of type of assessment and progress monitoring to ensure that the goals that we've created from personal reading plans are being met and that we're following like a growth and targeted improvement.
So is FastBridge required by Act 20?
It's a tool that we use to monitor progress.
Yeah, so progress monitoring is required by Act 20 and so
And you can't do that through Ames Web?
You can.
You can do some of it through Ames Web. FastBridge had been in the district long before Ames Web and Act 20. So they had been using it for progress monitoring long before.
Are they both K-12?
Yes.
They're available K-12. Ames Web, the state provides for grades 4K through 3 through Act 20. So, and then if we wanted to use Ames Web with more students, we would have to kind of pay for the difference.
So
Just
currently
as
we're
we
using
do.
Ames Web for K through 3.
Yes.
And then using
And
FastBridge?
for everybody else and for the progress monitoring component. And we had lots of discussion before Act 20, do we go all Ames Web, do we stay with FastBridge? We had just done some training for teachers in FastBridge, so the decision was made to keep FastBridge. I think we're having that conversation again soon now, 2 years in. Do we want to keep doing that? So that's a district choice.
And that's in connection to also the, students with IEPs, and so having, it's not just a CLA discussion, it's a big broad district discussion because that is a big component of that.
It impacts our school psychologists who use that data in the plans, the evaluations that they do, things like that. So it's a significant conversation.
And I know many of the school psychologists I've worked with prefer FastBridge
Yeah,
Right.
some do.
over Ames Web. That doesn't mean, that's just in my experience as a principal.
And in talking with other districts, some are using Ames Web, some continue to use FastBridge. It's, anytime you make a switch, then you have to think about the training component and the, just the lift that is for the employees, so. Can I go on?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
Perfect.
Unless there's further questions, I don't wanna jump over that. Alright, within the Act 20, we have had 96% of our staff completed that Cox Campus Early Literacy Learning. And it's been wonderful because they've been really implementing it into some of their ELA work. We did give the Ames Web Assessment Screener 4K to 3, both in fall and spring. Winter 4K did not take it, but kindergarten through 3rd grade did. We had various personal reading plans were created using our digital tool NextPath and shared digitally with families. And then there was a Tier 3 and Tier 2 literacy intervention instructional updates that kind of aligned to that Act 20, where we focused on some of our targeted interventions, learning around data-based decision-making, and then continuing to work on learning around fluency in our diagnostics. And then right around April, DPI released a new updated dyslexia guidebook. So we're looking at that a little bit in the district to kind of help us use that information and
Met the requirement of having that posted on our website and available to parents. So.
correct.
So for this Ames Web, they require it to be given for Act 20, fall, winter, and spring?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, these babies, okay. That's a lot of
And
testing.
we have windows within that time.
Yeah.
And how many days before the end of the year? Yeah, there's a whole process.
It's about 7 minutes of total testing for kids, pending on the grade.
4K, these are babies. Yeah, that's a lot in my,
Are there other standardized tests that are happening for these grade level students aside from Ames?
No, in fact, there was some classroom assessments that we've had the conversation of do we need to give these assessments, let's take them out and use the data that we have with what we've been required to give. 4K specifically, we're giving some integrity assessments and we said, what do we need these for? Let's do less. And Nina was a part of those conversations and we've tried to ask teachers to be like, we have data, how do we use that? And it's been big conversations that we've been having, because there is a lot of testing, but in more than anything, it's just figuring it out and what do we need and what do we know? I think that's the big discussion.
What information do we need to
Right.
make decisions. So as far as other standardized testing, in 4K, K, and 1, there isn't any additional, district or state standardized testing. In 2nd grade, they start taking math assessment, which is they take 3 times a year at this point. And then 3rd grade, the same. And then 3rd grade also has the state forward exam. So 2nd, 3rd grade is where it starts to ramp up a little more. And we've done different things at the 2nd grade level. Taken math a couple of times, they've taken it once a year. In fact, when Ames Web first came in, we kind of backed off our math requirement, and then principals really asked that we go back to having it 3 times a year. They appreciate that opportunity to have data and have their teachers have that concrete data with the national norming. So that was feedback we got, so we honored that.
As we looked at through the Act 20 component, there is now moving into what was that curricular component. So across K-5, we really have focused on aligning and refining our practice. Just like Lynn said with year 1, it was doing it to the fidelity. This year was looking at what does this really mean, and let's use this resource with some within the integrity kind of feedback. So we worked through this with collaborative planning time. I was able to be in a lot of classrooms to see it in action, just like Nina was. Focused on that resource usage and implementation of instruction. And the big lift for us this year was really focusing on what is our ELA priority standard. So what would be those things that we would want kids to end the year knowing and having some mastery in, so that we can kind of go back and make the right decisions when we're looking at a resource of what is the must-dos and the may-dos, air quotes, using that as the lighter term of that. The other piece around this is our 3-5 team attended a state report card training and collaborated around the forward assessment and standards. We had a lot of coaching focused on implementation, but more importantly, and we really took that small group that is connected to those PRPs and that pacing. And our year 2 focus was refine and align, but get into those instructional routines. Let's take some of the lift off of teachers, but put as what's our systematic routines that are gonna help kids? Because if kids with executive functions, I have 3 kids of my own, and learning and teaching the how to do this stuff, how to do learning is a big part of what we were thinking through. We noticed and looked at our foundational skills, and a lot of talk around writing rubrics and how we're giving feedback. There was a lot of standard application in connection to data. Our coaches also worked in supporting teachers with those interactive read alouds and the use of decodable texts, and focused on that student discourse and teacher talk. Are students talking? Do they know how to do it? What's the collaborative impact? It worked really nice through some of those inquiry projects that they have in week 6, as well as connecting it to other things. I was able to hear lovely transfer conversations in the 5th grade about, we were talking about this in science, and then they were able to pull up some environmental pieces in their ELA curriculum.
Can you give a quick example of an instructional routine?
So within a lot of the early literacy training, specifically Cox Campus, there are suggested instructional routines that they offer, and we've offered, because SAVIS is a guided resource, it's not a scripted resource. So depending on how people interpret that, they offer suggestions on how to instruct it, but they really do want teachers to come up with something. And in doing so, instructional routine has been offered through various things, Cox Campus, SAVIS itself, and then our work with the C6 early literacy. So one instructional routine is called a multi-syllabic word reading routine. So if I'm going to have the word introduction, how do I look at this word and how do I decode that word? Well, let's first find the vowels. Oh, there's an I, there's an O, so they go and underline, and students are kind of practicing that each time. So they work through that a lot in a gradual release model. So I'll do it, you do it again, or we do it, you do it. So if Anita Archer, you're familiar with her, really a big approach. So kids would go through that, that's that routine, and then they hope that that continues. It's not just a one and done routine, it's a consistent routine that we're working through. Decodable text, same thing. So what we do in our decodable text routines, which might be hey, we're gonna look at the book, let's survey the pictures, what are we noticing first? And then let's make a prediction. Okay, now we're gonna focus on the sound of short A. Let's listen for those sounds. And so it's a lot of the same language being used as teachers are instructing to it. Karen Amundsen, who was here to talk about social studies, would tell you she's worked really hard to put some of those instructional routines in place because it's been very helpful for her kids to follow and retain. And then our coaches have found ways that they love a big orthographically mapping routine. So how do you take the sound, then the name, and then we're gonna move and shift it and we're making it more multi-sensory in different components. So those are just a few examples. The way my view is set up is a week one, and then within each week one you have different components. And so they try to build it like, here's a word attack, and then you're gonna do your guided reading, and then you're going to do this, and within those they also offer suggested routines to help guide that learning and follow that explicit instruction or direct instruction approach to encourage, which really kind of is the reason why evidence-based instruction and a part of what came out of Act 20 is doing through that direct instruction and explicit instruction.
I think it fills in some of the gaps where my view guides
Yeah.
an instructional routine, but this gives that script that helps teachers know what to do, have students do next in a very explicit way. And I think the other thing that I think is just important for context is that the science-aligned instruction that Act 20 was requiring was a departure from what had been in place previously.
Correct.
So teachers are doing learning of, through the Cox campus and learning more about science-aligned instruction and having to begin to implement a new resource, kind of all at the same time. So it's a heavy lift.
It was very heavy. And I would say that year two really helped us kind of see some of those gaps within the resource. And that's our response, is to try to take the load off of teachers and give them some opportunities to kind of connect through this and consider how we're looking at those priority standards and listening. We wanted to just see in action, but hear what's working and what's not working, and in order to be responsive, both for students and for teachers. Because there was a lot of great feedback, and I look forward to kind of digging into that a little bit more next year. When we shift to second,
When you're referring to the my view and my perspective, that is through Savas?
Yes. So Savas is the publishing company. My view is the title of the K-5 curriculum. My perspectives is the title of the 6-12 curriculum. So.
And at the time of piloting and the curriculum review, each group independently did their review. And at the end of the day, we ended up with a K-12 resource. But that wasn't necessarily a requirement by any means. They each got to look at what they thought would work best, and at the end it was like, oh, we got a K-12 resource. So.
Yeah, it was interesting because it was 3 completely different
Groups of people.
people leading it, people working on it, and ended up in the same spot.
And in social studies, we're gonna get 3 different ones in
Yeah.
So looking at it from a secondary, my perspectives, you're looking at, we did the curriculum implementation with year 2. This year we brought teachers together to kind of look at their resource and what would we adjust? Given those pieces and the feedback that we heard, what is working, what isn't, and we started to have some of those conversations right after we really kind of honed in on our priority standards. We were able to do this on walkthroughs where we focused on resource usage, listening for student discourse, and talking through our high leverage literacy and instructional practices. And that's also where our coaching was focused and talked a lot about pacing. So almost every unit is completed over the course of a quarter in 6th through 12th grade. So a unit is completed in a quarter. So our 9th grade Romeo and Juliet unit has an opportunity to be like, oh wow, this is so awesome. We're really deep diving in. But one of the things we did find out, and you'll hear from Allison Dinkle, there's a lot of breadth in every resource, specifically at our 6th, 12, and that was a big part of we've never gotten to figure out how to go deep into it. So part of our work this year was let's really decide what do we need and what do we don't need, and priority standards help us make some of those decisions. Same question as you hear from social studies, it's that engagement with the texts. There was some talk of it's difficult. Yeah, it is. Let's think through that. There is really talking about who's doing the thinking and asking students to consider that and am I thinking about this, or is this all teacher telling me what to think? No, they weren't telling you what to think. It's we really want you to think, come up, and that's where inquiry kind of comes in, and that's where week 6 stuff, but also at secondary where they really tried to think about that essential question that too mimics what they see in social studies is mimicked in ELA, where each unit starts with those essential questions and trying to work through that through the variety of genres that they have available. We talked through that academic rigor and as well, engagement is not something we're not talking about. Like it is on our tongues every day because I think that is really impactful when you're thinking about what are students doing and are they enjoying it and learning and transferring. So when we move more specifically to these resources, I tried to do my best to summarize my view specifically of, I think it was like 110 teachers could have completed the survey.
Something like that,
Yes.
I don't remember. It was, you may have done a more detailed count. I had 90 some maybe,
Okay.
but you may have counted one for one. I did an estimate, so we had 32 responses.
Mhm.
So we're getting a fraction of.
Why do you think that is?
Well, we could take a lot of guesses. Time of year when the survey went out. And then the other piece is sometimes you don't complete a survey if you don't have a lot to complain about.
Yeah, it could be positive, it could be negative. I don't know. I was surprised by the number as well. But we got 32 responses, so that's good. So that's 32 people whose voice got to be heard in this formal way. Their voice gets to be heard
Pretty frequently.
very frequently in other informal ways, but
Mhm.
yes.
I mean, and our survey results were neutral, but informative. And it really is used to kind of think about like what is that collective learning focus and what are those skill gaps or for both our teachers, but our team through coaching and through intentional planning. You can see that the digital usage of teachers and students is high. I was able to see students engage in various ways around this resource. There are still areas of refinement. Foundational skills, the phonics component is a big focus that we're looking at next year. Really thinking about what the comprehension means. And that shows up with when we're thinking about comprehension, is it just the listening comprehension or is it the reading and comprehending? As well as writing. Writing is a big piece of feedback that everybody has asked for just because they want to make more connections to the reading and writing, and sometimes with our resource it doesn't feel as connected as they would like. And so we talked through this in various ways of what will that look like and how do we want to approach that.
Yeah, and how can we incorporate writing into science and social studies?
Correct. And we really talked more about what is that, some of those collective learning opportunities. The teachers have worked really hard with integration of the learning from Cox Campus, but is there more learning opportunities specifically around what the resource might already provide? But differentiation or instructional routines. So as I gave you one example, there are a lot of others, and how does that help? And how could that maybe blend or supplement or change? And not necessarily change, but match the standard more appropriately, that the maybe a weaker component of the resource. We talked a lot about formative and summative assessments and using that to be data-based decision-making. Corey Robb, one of the teachers at Valley View, he shared that he loves this curriculum because it gives specific teaching lessons around so many standards and skills, but it kind of helps that students can learn something organically, but they are also learning through that explicit instruction. He does miss like some of that independent reading task, and that was been a conversation, we'll talk a little bit more about that. But he also really enjoys the exit ticket components that are a part of the MyView curriculum that have allowed him to think through both in a formative assessment way, but he really likes that he has something that everybody can use that's a common tool, which wasn't necessarily a big part of the previous curriculum. Other teachers were able to share a little bit, some first grade teachers, they too talk a little around how they've supplemented with Cox Campus high leverage routines to fill out some of those areas. They want to look at, that coaching of the first grade team. They walk to and create small group lessons around the phonics. They're optional and they work to use that to differentiate a little now. Kristen Otto gave a quote, she provides a consistent framework for literacy instruction while exposing students to a variety of fiction and nonfiction texts. And it helps students to develop reading skills and build background knowledge at the same time. And I think that background knowledge building is a huge impact and is definitely something you're going to see, as we've already alluded to from, social studies, but science and more than that. What you also have up here is Melanie, excuse me, in your list of data collections. I did give her full response available to you all, but she talked about how the Building Knowledge Library, the My Focus Readers, and these are specific tools that we asked about in the survey and she kind of referenced in her positives. Her negatives are that sometimes the stories are long and there is a word study that lacks integration, and that's a really big thing that our coaches notice, but I've noticed as well, is like what is the connection to the spelling list, to the word study list, to the academic vocabulary, and that just you wouldn't know that from a year one. You only know that in year two of really trying to see and then giving the thought around and having more conversations with other schools. And that was something that I've been able to have this year that helped us kind of see like what are you all noticing? And we'll talk a little bit more about that. And sometimes K-12, the assessment conversation is that they're a little disconnected or they're because they're skill-based, that's still an opportunity for learning. What do they do and how do we use them? When I look at what the secondary kind of said with my perspectives, there's about 18 total teachers at 612. Half of them gave us some feedback. I did get some more responses from a couple more, but again, same digital usage for teachers and students is high. Our secondary really worked to take and use the Schoology platform for various assessments, addressing it differently, and thinking about how we're using the instructional structure. Because in secondary, they start with an anchor text, and then they go into peer group learning, and then they go into independent learning. And over the course of a quarter, that can be a very large amount, and there's so many texts. I would say there's probably 14 to 16 different variety of text components within each unit that gets to be overwhelming for teachers to decide and what it is. And they're all thematic and connected to those essential questions. So our time at secondary was really looking at what do we like about the structure, the instructional structure, and then how do we get all of the components listed in our ELA standards, which isn't just reading, it's reading and writing and language usage, and there's a lot to that, and that it's a big lift, as well as keeping sight of what we're doing, and engagement. So we're still looking at how we're connecting those differentiation opportunities in the resources for all students, but looking at those formative and summative assessment tools and how we can be responsive to that instruction. In some of that is through both like using what students, each secondary building has things like Star Time or Phoenix Time and trying to make those connections as well. Again, everybody who took this ranked it a 3, so it is neutral. In some ways, it's fine. And I think that is taking it as like, okay, we've got places to improve, we've got opportunities to grow, and there is so much excitement, I think, in some ways. And the teachers have worked really hard, and I think Allison Dingle talks through that a little bit. And there is more learning. Savis is updating pretty frequently with different tools that they're having available, different things that are helping teachers, different ways that we're going to coach to. We've been able to take some of the tools of Savis and help create some credit recovery options for students who might not have been this successful. And really building in that instructional coherence in a way that I think is helpful. When you look at what secondary said, they have their benefits and critiques. Their benefits include like that large variety of texts. They do still have those predictable routines that students become accustomed to, so like that large group whole text, that peer group learning, and then going into some of that independent text. My Perspectives contains a variety of literacy skills. They do have that clear scope and sequence in terms of the standards. They love the Hook and Inspire materials, and one of the really nice things is that My Perspectives has podcasts. They have various tools that really help get kids interested, and our middle school hones into those Hook Inspire materials because that is some of those interesting videos or different components, and all of the teachers, specifically at 9th and 10th grade, really thought through how do we take projects and make it modern. So I think during the ninth grade poetry unit they're looking at next year, they're gonna make a poetry task that's connected to Romeo and Juliet that takes both the framework of Shakespeare sonnet and then puts it into like different other, a student could use that and then rap to it. So trying to increase that engagement to it and make the learning that they're having to do fun. 10th grade looked at The Tempest, and so when you think of Shakespeare, and that's their unit 3, and a lot of great conversations at all levels around what do we do to just make this such a solid even more solid curriculum than it is. The feedback I got from principals today is like it's been super amazing at the high school by having this because the students have grown so dramatically and there is a very strong improvement in the data world by my perspectives. They're not wrong in their critiques either. There is very weak grammar resources, so that's a conversation that we've started to have 7 through 12. There's weak writing instructions with some of the performance tasks, and it's getting clear on what those performance tasks are and what are we assessing out of them. As we've said, there's that lack of depth. They can't just go on one skill because the skills spiral. It's repeated, and the choice, sometimes there's not enough choice and sometimes there's too much choice. And I think in some ways our resource just lacks what's the focus. With multiple genres, it's really hard. Am I gonna focus on just text structures with all of these types of text available or not? Allison Dinkle kind of gave you a little bit more on her piece of feedback, which I think you have the full copy to, but if you have questions, you can reach out. But my view and my perspectives is that these concerns aren't limiting. This has been the best that I can share and what I've heard from many other districts using Savvis. And they're listed right here. And then through our Savvis network, we really looked at like what is happening, what are the feedback they're doing. So I reached out to Elmbrook, to Kettle Moraine, to Merton, to all of these to be like, what's working? Because part of the big concern was our foundational skills at early literacy were weak, or the scope and sequence wasn't what we wanted it to be, or didn't make sense. And so we were trying to problem solve. Teachers were struggling with getting it, or it was going too fast. Handwriting was another component that became a common conversation. In fact, Franklin reached back out to me and be like, hey, what were you talking through? And that had an impact on our 4K. So we really tried to be listening and thinking through this in a way that is going to be sustainable and beneficial for teachers and students. The nice thing about Savvis is that we're all thinking through our insights, writing, same concerns our teachers shared were the same concerns other schools had. So it is something, and Savvis is listening. I was able to sit on a couple calls this year with curriculum writers at Savvis and pointed out like there's a gap and your assessments aren't working. And so just yesterday we got an email. They're like, hey, we reworked the assessments. And so I forwarded that on to our ELA department and I was like, I know we're gonna do some summer work around this, but keep this in mind because that type of feedback is incredibly impactful when it comes to being a listening curricular creator, especially with digital resources. So then they're editing their digital resources. Oftentimes textbooks you can't go back and edit, we'd have to buy a whole new set. And this is the nice part with what we have through the tools and through the teacher's ownership of making some of those adjustments has been incredibly impactful.
Yeah, that professional network that Savvis has provided for us and also just the informal networks that Sarah and I have with our counterparts in different districts has been super helpful. And I appreciate the time that I charged Sarah with going and having some of these conversations and she really took the time to dig in with these districts to find out what we could learn from them and also what we could share with them. And they've asked for, information from us as well to make sure that we're really have a clear picture and leaning on our network. And yes, Savvis came up with something yesterday. I know there are a couple other things coming, so.
Right, and I think part of what I heard with each of those districts was it wasn't the teachers and that literacy leadership component really had a big impact on how successful Savvis was. So the time spent that literacy coaches were taking to put priority standards in place, but more than anything, offering the professional development around instructional routines and doing kind of what Nina said, let me co-teach with you and let me partner with you to help do this in a way that's very effective. It's been very helpful. the students, again, same kind of thing, if a coach has been in your room, there's been some positive impact. Our third grade, and Corey was one of the teachers who had a coach in the room and really thought through that and reworked how Savvis was designed. Because our teachers took it initially, do it as it is written and in the order that it is written, and then as we got going with, this doesn't make sense, go in the order that makes the most sense to how it is. So while lesson 4 or day 4 of the whole week has a word study, but it's disconnected. Why are they confirming predictions on day 4 when they just read the story on day 1? So those pieces are like, no one says this is the time that you did it. Teachers' additions are created to be giving you as much information as possible, but your educational knowledge should be having that big impact and that similar conversations.
I think the challenge, and our literacy coaches have done a great job of supporting, under Sarah's leadership. I think one of the challenges with literacy that I just want to acknowledge was that at the same time we were bringing in new curriculum, we also had these Act 20 requirements and the screening 3 times a year and the writing of the PRPs, which was all new for teachers as well. And so our literacy coaches were all managing, all of those new pieces and new curriculum. So it has, while social studies was a lift, ELA, particularly at elementary, was a significant lift because it required a change of practice, new assessments, all of the things, and kind of all at once.
How many literacy coaches do we have at different levels?
4 at elementary and 1 at secondary.
So
Each school has a literacy
Yeah,
coach.
each elementary school has a full-time literacy
And there's
coach.
one split between the
Middle.
And she works in very much collaboration with the curriculum and learning coach. So that was, when we talk about like what coaching looks like, they really partner more at the secondary and share with CLC and CLC. And so when we were talking like social studies, there's some options. And I think we also have had different people who've been in the district for a long time and have, so, they're 80-20s. And so at the start of this year, we had people who are coaching at different, at smaller dosages. And that has had an impact too. And so now that we've looked at it from getting very clear directions and clear components and working really hard and partnering really with teachers to hear it and to offer some solutions. But it's been a heavy lift. It's been a heavy lift for teachers. And I think that's also the component that we want to think through is like a new social studies curriculum, a new ELA curriculum, Act 20. Wow, that's a lot. So our coaches worked to kind of take off some of that pressure and put it on them and process through that and bring them in just to give time back to the classroom and the class student.
While making sure they were learning the new early literacy
Right.
pieces that were expected of all of us. We've all engaged in that literacy learning, so.
Yeah.
So I think year 1 and then year 2 and then, that refining and aligning is, there's some real opportunity here moving in year 3, which I think will be good.
And it's very exciting. The feedback I get is that, the coaches are excited to work with teachers, but they're also seeing it as what the work that we're doing isn't isolated to ELA. It's connecting writing to reading, it's connecting social studies or writing to science and social studies. It's thinking about reading in just different areas too. It's all disciplines. So that's the piece that through our collaborative coaching kind of components has helped. But it's worth noting, as we've talked about some of the gaps, that independent reading, we started to have the conversation on how we're bringing back novels. So within 6th grade, they're looking at bringing back Bridge to Terabithia or Wrinkle in Time, Flowers for Algernon and Among the Hidden, all Savvis approved tools. 9th grade is moving forward with the Unbroken. Things Fall Apart was at Honors and Great Gatsby. 11th grade did not have any ads because they had one this year, which was I'm gonna say the wrong novel. They added it. I'm trying to think of it. I was gonna say First They Killed My Father, but that's not it.
But Savvis had a number of novel connections that they built into the curriculum, and we first started with just doing the resource just to get that under our belts, and then are now bringing these pieces in as they make sense and as they connect and as we can fit in the time, because obviously there's a lot there already.
Yes, and that was a big part of like, felt like kids weren't reading, and I'd agree. Like stamina is a big part of how we get kids to do that independent piece, and so you have to give access to that. And so some of our short texts or abbreviated texts were not hitting the mark with every kid, and I think this is the part where a lot of opportunity is there. Honors courses were able to utilize novels, and the hope is that we get more. 12th grade is coming back with some more through some of their opportunities, and 12th grade will get revisited a little bit more next year too, as we think through of like, what's that college prep piece that we need to look at, and how do we support that? But overall with literacy in general.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Is 7th grade doing a novel?
7th grade did not at this time have a novel in plan, but they've talked about it, they didn't make a full decision on it.
And so you're saying that these ones will be implemented next school year?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Potentially, yeah.
Great.
So
That was it.
Yeah, we wanted them to be the drivers of that.
yes, it was and they looked at it from the units, so like maybe this wasn't our favorite unit, but if we could add it, or we talked at 7th grade, one of the novels that they just didn't think a kid would latch on to as much, that is a big part of 7th grade, is Cinder. It's a technology one. They're like, oh, well, could we do dystopian book clubs? And I was like, well, let's think through that. And so that's still kind of a process to think through. And our 7th grade team only was able to collaborate once this year, but we're gonna talk it out this summer too. At the secondary, Lynn and I worked with our coaches to kind of really focus on, and principals, to really focus on the disciplinary literacy. And as I mentioned, it's like, who's doing the thinking? That was kind of our essential question as our work in disciplinary literacy. And over the course of this year, we really had each content area look at this from specific goals. And so content areas created specific goals connected to literacy strategies and high impact, high leverage strategies. And they were thinking and trying to create actionable tasks for teachers. And we worked through this monthly professional practice and collaboration over the course of the school year. And then there's some data pieces that I'm gonna try to buzz through.
Quick question about disciplinary literacy.
Mhm.
So that's what was worked on this year. Is that continuing, or is it like now we'll move on?
Oh, no, that is a integral part to how it is going in. So yeah, it's continuing. And we worked really hard to combine it into a lot. So disciplinary literacy really is just somewhat kind of narrowed down to great instructional practices that happened in secondary. So when we think about disciplinary literacy, as we talked about who's doing the thinking, now the big question is, how do we know? And that kind of matches some of our district priorities and movement towards that.
So disciplinary literacy was last school year, not the one we just finished, but the one before. The principals have requested that we engage with CISA 6. They have a disciplinary literacy academy, where we had a consultant come on site for it was the second half of last school year, and then a few times this school year, for some specific learning around reading in the different literate disciplines. And how do you write like a historian or write like a scientist, et cetera. And so we engaged in that learning with our core principals selected our core curricular chairs, engaged in that learning with principals and coaches. And that was a number of times over the last 2 years, and then they would bring that back to their teams as well as some professional learning. So I think that formal academy is done at this point. We can bring a consultant in for a couple of times next year just to check in and be a thought partner for that work. So we'll see it more infused as opposed to something separate. But we've done a nice job of outlining some draft plans with the coaches for principals to kind of look at and decide how they want to proceed with that work in their schools.
And 2 years ago, like Amy was saying, from the math perspective, so I was a math teacher myself, for a lot of years. And back in the beginning of my career, like here in Menominee Falls, every single teacher went over to district office and did a training with Doug Buell, and we learned literacy strategies. And then we all had to take that same strategy and try to figure out how it worked in our content area, where the different shift has been, especially at secondary, they are the content experts. And so we start with the content that they are teaching, and then what literacy strategies make sense for how to think like a mathematician, So
I would agree, that's been a shift in practice.
Yep.
In what has happened here recently that I think has been
Mhm.
a reasonable and
It's been
so
a,
logical next step.
and it's been a nice framework for our coaches to kind of get into the support all content areas with that kind of general lens, in some ways too.
Let's take a quick look at data.
Yeah, so we've talked about Act 20, we've talked about our resource, let's see how it's kind of working through. So what you see up here is just the required screening, kind of back to what you'd asked, is like, what do we have to do? And so these are the small types of tests and the timing it takes. You'll see at each grade level what that fall, middle, spring looks like. So you're assessing with early literacy those initial sounds and then the letter word sounds at the end for 4K. And then each of those break down with the types of tests. And
You can see, you know, at 4K, it's just a little bit initial sounds. Do they know their letter sounds? And then when we get to 5K, there's really a lot of assessment because there's so much growth happening in so many different areas when you think about a 5-year-old. And their formal exposure to learning literacy or learning to read. And then first grade starts out with a bunch and then starts to fade over time as those skills become more solid. And you can see the estimated time too, about how much time each of those assessments takes, as well as how it's administered. So most of them are administered with the teacher completing a DRF or a digital record form, which means the teacher is sitting side by side with the student, recording what the student's answers are to the various prompts. And then with vocabulary, there's an opportunity for students to take an assessment online. So it is a time intensive from an adult standpoint because these tests are being administered one-on-one.
And it's been informative and challenging.
And we're not alone in that.
And we're not at all, so.
We're in good company across the state with that.
When you look at this, what you see in front of you is the gauge by school. So how did we do as a district? In our spring, you'll notice to the far left, this is the student, 13.3 students, so about 134. District-wide, who fell below the 25th percentile, and then the rest go by school. And the top one, the red is Ben Franklin, the green is Shady Lane, the blue is Riverside, and the yellow is Valley View. The blue and yellow does include only third grade, and I think that's important when you're looking at comparing numbers.
Yes, the third graders at Valley and Riverside are the only grade level.
Yes.
Only tested with Ames Web for Act 20.
Then we broke it down again just by grade level, so of the total in the district, how many students at grade level, you'll see the whole same numbers, but then at the 25th at 5K, we have these numbers around 23, our first grade 31, second grade 34, and third grade 46.
Of course, the skills get more complex over time, so it is not uncommon to see numbers grow as they get a little bit older. But each of those students falling none within the Burgundy band would have a personal reading plan.
Correct.
That would support their continued learning.
So with all literacy data, we start there with our early literacy, and then with this, we kind of use this to see how that's shaping up across school. So you'll see here how our spring MAC data, this was their achievement by school. And I think achievement is where we chose when we talked through what data to share. A lot of this starts at all grades, so 74th percentile, that's what that green little button is over there. And you know, of our students are achieving the expectations and normed expectations in the area of reading. And then it gets broken down by grade level. It's broken down by school, excuse me. So this would just be second grade at Shady Lane, second grade and then all grades at Valley View.
Shady Lane, Riverside, Valley View, North Middle School. And this is compared nationally. The goal obviously is to see a lot more blue and green and a lot less red and orange there.
And I think too, while testing is what it is, the data helps us understand how we're doing with kids and how we're moving them, and that's where achievement does make a difference. As well as that next piece when we're looking at it by grade level. So you'll see here, starting at grade 2, and then all the way up to grade 8. This
Just a quick snapshot.
it's really lighthearted and intended to be, this is something our staff have used to kind of talk through building goals and thinking through that on supporting all of our students. What you'll see next is going to be our STAR testing, so this is around 9th through 11th grade, so same color coordination, and we'll see that our blues and greens are there. We have 11, which is approaching at the end of spring, so that's state benchmark of STAR testing. And then how we're using this information is, again, it's informing it's a screener. So we're seeing how this is working and then the impact it's going to have with other testing going forward. We've talked a lot about it at the secondary level of how we'll use this, how STAR testing should show up in the classroom. And it's a lot of kind of going to come back to that standards work. So our ELA teachers looking at some of those standards and how they're ranking across the state and kind of previewing what we get from forward standards work and then using STAR testing to see if that also is improving.
And STAR is an assessment that the district has chosen to give, precedes both me and Sarah, so it's been going on for a long time, and it's given for ELA class and then used to help identify who may need more support through our strategic reading class at the high school.
Correct. Which is where we land at the end. So within all of this, in the world of literacy, we do have some multi-level systems of support across K-12. K-3, you start with those PRPs, as well as some pull-outs, win time, different intervention times that have been discussed. At the middle school, we have the course called VIP Reading, and at the high school, we have strategic reading. In all of this, we're using diagnostics and progress monitoring, and this year we've worked FastBridge. We've worked to improve our entrance and exit criteria so it gets very clear for students to leave or get and enter. It's not just by feeling, we want to be very data specific. And we've improved the systemized discussion to best support students. So conversations are happening from 8th to 9th grade, 5th to 6th, 2nd to 3rd, and we've worked hard to review our intervention resources and the impact that it's having. From this review, we've looked at what connections we are making, so some small shifts within the courses at the secondary resulted in a more targeted tier 2 where we're pulling some of those extra resources from SAVIS with teachers providing some more tier 2 in connection, and then targeted tier 3 groups based on area of need or skill deficit. And then strategic reading with an 80-minute block. We threw out the suggestion to look at it and are working and plan towards doing it in more consistent 45-minute mini blocks versus trying to do 80 minutes every other day, which is a challenge, and Dan has worked hard to try to make that happen. And then looked at our strategic reading being more of those targeted tier 3. So students who really do fall below that 25th percentile in alignment with where kind of the PRP work, and then looking at that tier 2. Because we've just had a lot of different conversations and it's been nice to have what we're looking at it from a whole vertical alignment component and building those in a way that supports all of the needs, school psychs and the different energy that everything happens. I love literacy, but literacy is kind of messy. And so we've done our best to clean it, systemize, and continue to work and grow. And I think that's the biggest, the most fun in some ways of like, oh wow, because the nice thing about PRPs, while it might feel uncomfortable, it's personal. And I think that's the big shift that we've worked to be like, let's be personal and really think about that for what does each kid need, not what does the masses need. And I think that's been incredibly important for all of us as we look at both our tier 1, our core resources, my view SAVIS, my perspectives, and then working that up through that multi-level systems of support. I talked a lot, I'm sorry. There's probably questions.
So would you say that this multi-level system support shifts are things at like looking ahead into year 3 that will be done at the secondary level?
Mm-hmm.
What are things looking ahead at the elementary level?
So within the elementary level, because a lot of our grades and schools have their own schedules, their multi-level systems of support are done through more of that tier 2, where teachers are getting some small group pullouts or push-ins. And then at tier 3, we have our reading interventionists providing more targeted supports based on whether the goals of the PRP or some of that data that we're gathering from Ames Web and Ames Diagnostics. So then working through what does that mean? It's still kind of a work in progress, but I think we worked to look at it from a dosage land and using data-based decision making to do that. So not everybody needs 30 minutes. Maybe it's a supported push-in with a reading interventionist to work on 15 minutes of letter names and letter sounds. And then maybe for another group of kids, we're gonna use something more targeted like a U-Fly at second grade, because we had some of those gaps showed up from our Ames Web assessments that we want to address. And this is a structured research-based tool coming out of the Florida Center for Research and Reading. They created this tool and then we've started to implement it to the fidelity. So really thinking through what tools do we have and what is our menu of options to meet the needs of each kid, because it's not just one size fits all, and that's the biggest shift that we're really working towards, and doing that in collaboration with all students. We've purchased some different resources and have used that, like Wilson Foundations, Just Words, and identifying that. And I've taken the time, and our coaches have taken the time, and our interventionists have taken the time to get trained in that, to look at the research behind it, to get on like What Works Clearinghouse, start to have those conversations and really, as you said, think about what is that effectively implementing it and then doing it in a way that is, evidence-based and actionable. And I think that's where, when we look at MLSS, that's definitely in line with how you guys kind of are going to approach curriculum. That's how we've been approaching it from the intervention lens this year.
Really try to fill those gaps for kids who have gaps above and beyond. Need that more support.
So then what are year 3 focus for?
Well, year 3 really does just continue to grow in our usage. When we look at year 3, what I looked at and I took from the survey is those, ideas of refinement, the foundational skills specific to comprehension and writing in the elementary.
Thank you.
Our teachers and our coaches have found that those explicit instructional routines have such a positive impact, and they really want to scaffold that for teachers in a way that's going to make sense, and through how we're going to adjust the gaps in the resource to better serve our kids. From an MLSS lens, same kind of concept. What are we doing and how do we take tier 2, tier 3? Some of our summer work is just looking at small group instruction. And continue that. That's been a common goal over the last couple of years with different teachers and different coaches.
Continue to get better.
And continue to get better and use what we have that has that instructional coherence. So a routine that I'm doing in class will then just be maybe go slower or maybe be reiterated, or working in that collaborative nature for interventionists and coaches and teachers to work in a more cohesive team. And that's a big vision, I think, is just continue to have conversation.
So what a student experiences in class then can be supported in maybe a small group intervention if they're in need of more support.
Correct.
And then the teacher and the interventionist are talking together about how the student can transfer their skills back to the classroom.
And that's a big lift, I think. That's not easy, but we really want to make that impact for kids and lessen the numbers.
But yes, here I think
I see.
in the survey data was just some of the things that they'll be working on. And again, some of it has already come through in summer work requests for different folks. And then some of it will be Sarah's work over the summer, and we'll pick it up when we get back, continue to refine and get better.
And then I think at secondary it was still, they talked a little bit about grammar, but writing, and they're ready to really think through that from a thematic and essential question kind of component, and their addition of novels and getting, it has a huge impact on kids. And looking through what is that structure of instruction? Do we have to start with how it's written, or should we look at it because it's better themed and more engaging? Grammar is probably more of that, grammar and writing is more of the focus, as well as that differentiation opportunities. I don't know how frequently, and this is just observational, but some of our students with IEPs are not always accessing our resource, and so trying to give that learning to kind of create more collaborative opportunities for students with IEPs to access the learning and participate fully, versus maybe abbreviated parts of situations or, and then I think assessments too. We're always looking at that because that's our touch points and our dipsticks between both formative and summative. And how do we respond to what kids are doing? And that responsiveness is a big part of what we've talked about at the disciplinary literacy lands, but it's also what we're talking about K-12. And it's exciting because there's a lot of passion in this building and these, in all of these buildings. And it's something that I think through really effective listening and being thoughtful and collaborative, the teachers are ready to rock it out and ready to give that permission to, I don't even need permission, they just really wanna do it and I wanna be there to cheer them on.
Just to piggyback on something you said about special ed, I know that's a focus really, always at all of our buildings, right, meeting the needs of each and every student, but I know at the middle school, there's some very specific focus on making those connections between regular classroom and special ed, and that's kind of the focus of hiring our new assistant principal with the kind of a focus on some special education, things like that, that'll support that work as well.
Just to make sure I'm reading these surveys correctly, because I didn't see it's written, but like a 1 means like it's not going so hot, and 5 is it's going hot.
Yes.
Okay.
And like I said, in year 2, I don't expect, especially with something that is as much of a departure from what they've done before, I don't expect all 5s for sure, right? If we can get to some 3s, I feel like that's probably where we are to be expected. I think one of the areas that Sarah identified was, or the teachers identified, was handwriting. And do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because because I was like, wow, I mean, we've talked a lot about handwriting. So I'm surprised to see so many handwriting ones, so I'll let you talk about that.
Yeah, so when you look at handwriting, the way that SAVIS is set, so previously we've had used handwriting without tears. Things that you come with learning, things I didn't always know, even as a mom of 3 girls, and it's like, oh, hey, I just thought the teachers were doing this, but then then your oldest doesn't know how to write anything, and she looks like she's a serial killer when she writes, so like you have concerns. But that being said, it started to have some honest questions. With research around literacy, connecting sounds and symbol relationships and taking the sounds and writing the sounds has a huge impact on the brain. And then we noticed that some of these things, I mean, we're talking about our phonics, scope, and sequence, our handwriting wasn't in alignment with that. And so we looked a lot at how are we doing this, and we used different people and different pieces of research that comes up. Wiley Blevins, if you're familiar with him as a researcher, he was one who's like, there's different levels in which we should teach it, and you should teach it a lot of different ways, which resulted into our big conversations at the 4K on how we teach handwriting. My daughter had her 4K graduation, so I'm just thinking about this. They taught motor planning, and motor planning became a thing I didn't ever think I would talk about as much as I did this year, and look at all the ways you motor plan, but really it's how you say pull down, pull over, hop. Handwriting with Tears uses hop, skips, and jumps. Cox Campus uses a pull down approach or move up. And so this directional thing became a really interesting conversation. And you think about, as you said, those babies, do they know how to do it? The other piece is when you look at kids, how their fine motor skills are not fully developed in 4K, so you have to address that. So we talked at 4K, and then that resulted in having those bigger conversations at kindergarten on how are we teaching the alphabet. And so research says actually teaching the alphabet, A, B, C, D, E, F, G in order, starts with that really nicely, and then you kind of come back to another round. So our 4K adjusted this year and are going to launch doing handwriting through 4 rounds of handwriting instruction, focusing on the fine motors pieces, making lines and circles and shapes and coloring and pencil grips, and then moving into let's learn the alphabet, and then exposing kids to both capital letters and lowercase letters, because that was the big issue. If we were only teaching capital letters, but our assessments have lowercase letters, do kids see that right away? And in all reality, lowercase is what kids see more often when they're doing interactive readings or your parents are reading with them. And so it became a really interesting conversation and has resulted in a lot of like, okay, so then our coaches kind of proposed a plan on now with kindergarten, we would like to look at this of handwriting being connected to the phonics and the phonemic and the sounds that they're being taught. So whatever letter we're learning, let's match the sound to that letter. So we're going to look at that with kindergarten this year about like how do we blend our both alphabet and letter knowledge and letter ID to the letter writing components, and then start to build that language and writing piece even more, and see how 4K launches it this next coming year, and then using that to kind of guide into our first grade. Our state standards do require cursive a little bit, and so that is something that we noticed in our priority standards, and so we started to have that conversation. And you know, cursive writing through SAVIS is at second grade, and in our standards it's at third grade. And so what do we need to do to adjust from that supplemental resource component? Typing is at fifth grade. These are things that I don't know if we always realized, and it started to become very interesting when we were bringing it to teachers, because like, oh my gosh, that's a lot, I have to teach a lot. And I'm like, okay, well, let's get thinking through what does that mean and how do we make those options available. And timing, time to teach is a lot. It's very interesting within each of our buildings because every principal approaches the times that they have. We have instructional time frameworks, and then how they build it is up to them. And so we've had a lot of wonderful conversations, and there's still a lot of processing, I think, is the best way to go. And 4K has a plan. We're going to try to model that plan for our kindergarten so that we're connecting letter names and letter sounds in that early literacy piece and teaching things, both capital letters and lowercase at the same time.
So we were not alone in having the handwriting conversation. I talked with another director who had not previously worked at elementary school and was like, I've spent so much time talking about handwriting. And I didn't, and being a high school, I think it's high school science maybe or something like that, I didn't realize how much you could talk about elementary school handwriting. It's like you can spend a lot of time talking about handwriting, it's important.
It is. So we've adjusted our plans and have thought through it. Our resource doesn't have everything perfect, but they too took that feedback and have added more. And we started to have the conversations just within a pacing component of how do we launch things differently. Because if 4K comes with knowing all their letters, then do we start things differently?
One, does that entail too, like I imagine like in 4K, maybe even 5K, like manipulating Play-Doh
Yes.
or the
Absolutely.
sand writing and, okay.
Yes.
Shaving
Yeah,
cream.
lots of
Lots of that. And that's the fun part, because that's even better when you do it with the sound.
Right.
So like a letter and sound is going to have more fun when you're playing in shaving cream. You're gonna remember the A says ah.
Right.
Because you feel that. And
Right.
that's the cool part.
Yeah, so we definitely do that.
Wasn't there something like Batman?
Oh, Matman is definitely handwriting without tears.
Okay.
And that's
Okay.
staying in 4K. And that does connect, like you're doing your lines and your circles and, you know, like the bat and balls.
Yeah,
is
yeah, yep,
my
you
children.
were
Yeah.
right on, you're right on.
So Matman is definitely there.
I'll just add one more thing, and I'd be remiss if I didn't share this, but again, I'm just always about student engagement, I guess, but this is kind of funny, but also it struck me, I guess. I was driving in the car and I had a whole, car full of kids, 3rd and 5th grade, because it's my children and their friends. And one of them was like, hey, Miss Schmalin, you're on the school board, right? And I was like, yes, I am. They're like, can you do something about my view? And I was like, I don't really know what you mean, and I'm trying to they're like, it's just boring. It's just boring. Like, there's gotta be something to excite us more, and I was like, okay. And so then later I did talk to my kids more about it, because I was like, okay, I'm not gonna get into all of this. But were just able to express that, my 3rd grader was shocked that my view continued into her next school. She thought it was just a K through 2 thing. And so I thought that was interesting. And then through the year, I don't know if it was a little bit of help from her teacher, but in the beginning of the year, she was like, I booed when this came up. And then now she's a little bit more like, oh, okay, I guess we have to do it, is her attitude right now. And then my 5th grader, she just keeps saying that her friends they're gonna write a petition to us on the school board. And so I just,
That's actually a requirement in my view, is that they do have to write certain things
that is
of
true.
because
There
they are
is.
seeking out, and
know
community
about
engagement is a
Yeah.
huge part of it.
yeah.
And I don't
That's
disagree with your children. There are various components of my view that do get long-winded. And
Yeah.
I think that is definitely the part that we're looking at more closely to getting clearer
Yeah.
around what does that really mean? Cause
The
that,
routines help.
what are those, the routines will help, but more than anything, your two components, 3rd and 5th grade, they have long read aloud stories.
Yeah.
And these read aloud stories are in every genre and never like, some grades are taking graphic organizers and thinking about it, and some are just reading it.
Yeah.
With like, and that's where through our routines, but also just look like collective planning is like, what can we do?
Yeah.
And I think that time, teachers taking that time to look at, how do I up the ante on this? So things have been like, we're putting posters together and thinking through, like, I think there was like a Babe Ruth poster that we talked about it from a fluency, or like these read alouds. But it's reestablishing what those read alouds are. Like, do 5th grade need as many read alouds? No, but could we do some shared reading and put that independent reading? And those are conversations that are definitely happening. And I hear that because I also think with year 2, it's going to be vastly different than how they might have done kindergarten or 1st grade when you just picked a book and you sat and maybe you like just pretended to read for a while. And so like, there's 2 ways to look at this. So the engagement is there because they have to sit and listen, and they maybe have to sit in one spot. But, or they could hide behind a book for a while, and depending on what they had. It is very valid and it's long, and there's work happening.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
that's the one thing I'm like,
I mean, I can
feel
take it
good.
with a grain of salt, I'm
And
not
I
like,
think they have permission, because we have had some teams, I'm sorry, I
Yeah.
didn't interrupt, but we had some teams that did some different things around that I think seemed to increase the engagement, or at
Yes.
least that feeling of the long-winded and the lengthy, so.
Yeah, a lot of graphic organizers, a lot of stop and thinks, and that's where they're connecting that inquiry piece. But it's teacher driven.
Yeah.
And like, that's the other piece, it depends on, you have the resources, and what does a teacher wanna do with it? And I think one teacher might be like, I'm gonna just do it as it is, and another teacher will be like, oh my gosh, I stopped and we're gonna build because we were reading about Mount Everest, let's build Mount Everest together and talk through what details we can get from the story and how do you pull that out. And so getting clear on what each of those components are within each story itself. But that's the kind of structure of my view, it's like a read aloud, and that's the part I think also gets very boring for kids. First we do a read aloud, then we're gonna do a day 2, and you're gonna go back in the story, and in the story you're gonna look for these types of details, and it's a specific skill, and let's look at our anchor chart with it. And the teachers have worked hard, and they're still, I think, ready to go more.
Well, and my impression is that teachers were excited to have a new reading resource, you know, like shift from where we were.
I think many were. I think I definitely heard from some who weren't excited.
Okay.
I think it was mixed. There was mixed reaction. And at the end of the day, the law required, we knew there was a need. I felt there was a need. But there was also a law that came into place that kind of prompted it as well with the Act 20. So I think everybody has successfully made the shift, and we just continue to refine and just remind people, if it's not working for you, and what works one day may not work another, right? You know, I always think about when I taught 1st grade, and the first day there was a snowfall, that day some things didn't work the way they used to. I don't know, the snow out the window used to be just a trigger. So then you have to adapt, and that's your art of teaching. That is still the most important part of any of this work that we do with these resources. It's that art of teaching that each and every one of our great teachers brings to the classroom every day.
Art and passion, a lot of love.
Any other questions about ELA? Say thank you to Sarah, and thank you to all the teachers who had notes, I know.
Yes, and I did my best to represent them as best as possible, and hopefully you saw all of that too.
Okay, then we'll move on to the science standards review.
Yes,
Right?
yes, we can. So, as requested and as we discussed, bringing forward science standards, we are bringing forward the K-12 Wisconsin Science Standards. We currently have in place the Next Gen Science Standards, which DPI would tell us they're virtually the same. But this will allow us to have K-12 kind of continuity across our system and be aligned with precisely what the state of Wisconsin offers. We also had discussed previously that there were some standards for middle school that weren't adopted at the time, and those standards are woven into this. So we know there are some standards at middle school that our students are being tested on with the forward exam and are not currently being taught in our district. So we attached the standards here. The science teachers at high school and middle school spent some time, as we did our professional learning this year, around standards. They focused on, they already know the next gen standards really well. Obviously, like I said, these are virtually identical. They're just structured in a different way. We asked them to unpack these in anticipation that at some point we would be bringing them forward for adoption. Our current curriculum development policy and our new curriculum development policy in Neola both refer to adopting state academic standards rather than national academic standards, so this would bring us in line. It doesn't explicitly say not academic standard, not national, it just says state, so this just brings us in line with that. Yes, Lynn talked with both our high school chair and Dana Kapatich and our middle school chair, Julie Petzel, around whether they were ready to have these come forward, so I'll let her read that statement, then I have additional information from Julie.
They both apologized that they couldn't be here, but they retro a statement again. So from the North Middle School, Julie Petzel said the middle school science department is excited to bring the Wisconsin state standards to the forefront, and we have already been working on unpacking them. This is exciting and a needed change. We look forward to the challenges and work ahead of us. And Dana from the high school curricular chair, the science department at Menominee Falls High School has worked at identifying and unpacking the Wisconsin state standards this year. We feel that these standards should be adopted as our standards for the Menominee Falls Science Department. The NGSS and state standards in science are not very different, and our courses are currently aligned to both.
I will say when I talked to Julie Petzel, because the middle school would have the largest lift of kind of some new standards that they're not currently teaching. She was concerned about just the timing of this and making sure that she had adequate time to bring those pieces to her students. And so we talked a little bit about, well, what would you need? Well, they're probably missing some resources in order to teach these pieces and would need resources and time. And I said I can provide both of those. And we can do it in a time frame that makes sense to them. So I would not expect or ask for a full-blown unit next school year. Obviously, teachers are already gone for the summer. But could we perhaps find an article or an activity or video, a couple of videos to start exposing students to these concepts and then plan more thoughtfully for 27-28 implementation of some of those standards. And that seemed maybe to just kind of ease maybe some of the concern about feeling like it needed to be done right away. So hopefully that's acceptable, but I wanted to be responsive to what she was saying and give them the time that they needed. I do believe in there, for example, evolution is one of the topics that we would be adding in. There is a textbook for their current resource that they did not purchase at the time. So I don't know if we would go forward and purchase that. They are just a couple of years away from a curricular renewal. Overall feedback I've gotten is they would like to look at a different resource, so it doesn't make sense to purchase something that we only use for a couple of years. Like, those are conversations we haven't deeply had yet that I would want to have as a part of this process. So from my perspective, starting slow and maybe easing in with just some supplemental resources to start might be the path forward.
What did they do for the curriculum renewal?
They start year one this year.
Yeah, so they would be looking at potentially piloting a resource. They're in year 5 of their current, or they will be starting year 5 this next year. So a pilot of a new resource is still probably a year or two away.
Just curious.
Yeah, but we'll start having the conversation. It feels like we just implemented it, but it's going to be in year 5. So we typically try to keep things on a 7-year cycle.
And then when she's saying she needs resources and time, would that be something that could be done as soon as this summer, or you're thinking more overtime?
It could be, she seems like maybe she wanted to wait and do some work, this fall or this next school year and perhaps next summer to finalize things.
And I spoke with her too, and their team, like I said, just like the social studies, they collaborate, you know, really, the teachers get together weekly. And I think she was kind of feeling comfortable that we could do this like as they went through each unit, kind of looking at where would things make sense and doing small changes this first, you know, this first year, and then similar conversation.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
So, and I just,
But this is just as adopting the science standards,
Just adopting
similar
the
to the
standards.
personal financial literacy standards.
yes.
Yes.
And from what I heard, the curriculum leaders at both levels are saying, these are solid standards, we would love if they're adopted, our course is already aligned,
Yes,
that would be great.
yeah, yes, that would be great.
They've already been
At middle
working on
school, but we
taking
probably
Joe
need
back
more
in.
time. So any resource that we would adopt specifically that we would consider kind of a core resource, we would bring forward to you for review and approval. At that point. I mean, if we start with some articles and some videos, we can do that just supplementally. But if we end up purchasing that chapter or anything like, or that unit, we would bring that forward. So that we haven't had that discussion beyond hey, I know you've been wanting this. Here, I think, you know, the timing is right to do this. But we need to maybe just be mindful about how much work it might be to implement. So, which I wanted to do.
Okay, any questions about the science standards? Like, we are doing the practice, just to clarify, that we won't approve these tonight. We'll have time to read them like we did for the personal financial literacy ones.
And they'll come back for approval next.
Yes.
Yes, the next time. Because we recognize there's a lot to read there. Just for time.
Were you gonna ask something? Sorry.
What do we have in place of this right now? We
NGSS,
Yeah,
which is the
the
national.
national recommended science standards, which these are based on. So again, they're very, very similar. They're structured differently. There's a little bit different information. DPI actually has a video
And a crosswalk on.
on how they're alike and how they're different, which I can definitely send
Okay.
to you to review, because that did help me kind of solidify, these really aren't that different.
But correct me if I'm wrong, this is also though like how, I just keep pointing at this, but the personal financial literacy standards were up for review. The science ones are up, like it's part of our cycle as a committee. So it's not like, we're not like not doing the standards right now.
Right.
It's just like, you know, every, I don't know how many years, they cycle through like the committee.
Yes. So yes.
This is from 2017, what we're looking at here.
So I can help fill in the gap there. That's a great question. So yes, at the time these were initially adopted, our school district, I believe shortly before, had adopted the next gen science standards, which were written first. So those were the national standards. That's what we adopted. A little bit later, Wisconsin standards came into existence in 2017. We did not adopt those at this time. Those standards were just up for review sometime in either 2025 or early 2026. It's starting to blend together. And these standards were, again, through DPI. And the state of Wisconsin said they're not changing these standards. So they should be in place for another 7 years. They might come out with a different format shortly, but the standards are not changing.
Okay.
So we're good in adopting these. We're good for another, 7 to however many years they decide to. They're on a cycle.
Because they're saying like, they're good.
They're good. We're not changing them. They don't need to change.
They're not like, we don't feel like doing it this year.
No, they looked at them, a conscious decision was made, I got it wasn't a press release, but I got information from the state, like, we've reviewed these, the state superintendent has signed off that we're not changing these at this time, so, which I think then solidified for us, we're good to move forward with these, so, over time, you will see us coming with, I think a number of different standards as we're kind of working through the process, and different groups are doing curriculum review, we'll be like, we're ready for these, and then next, and so on, so. But I'll try not to give them all to you at the same time.
appreciate
to be respectful
Well, and
about
I-
a little bit at a time.
Yeah, I appreciate some time to look at it, let it digest. You know, like I like that process of like, you give it to us, we have time until the next meeting.
Yeah, that has worked for us, worked for me so far in the work that I've done, so
And then,
happy to continue that.
yeah, I also appreciate the feedback from staff that we got
Yes.
for both sets so far.
And elementary has mystery science, which is very well aligned also. So, and we don't really have any standards changes, so I don't think it's going to be, I mean, you and I talked and so that should be
Adopting these aren't going to impact elementary resources or teaching and learning.
Quick, when you say like it's on a 7-year cycle to update and you're saying that, it all of a sudden just entered my mind. So if we do a curriculum update, is that K through 12 for science or would that be 6 through 12?
No, it's, as I started to build that initial curriculum cycle, I took into consideration where everybody was. So when I
Okay.
first started, we were mid-elementary science adoption. And we had just done a middle school science adoption. So those are, and the high school, they're on completely different
Okay.
cycles for science. Social studies is now 6-12 together, and ELA ended up K-12 altogether. So it just kind of depends on
Okay. Well,
where
I
they
just
were.
wonder too,
Yeah.
because I'm like, oh, hey, we have been talking about the heavy lift of ELA and social
Yeah.
studies. Are we talking about science? Like, and I know math is coming, like,
High school science is coming up next. They're the
Yeah.
last core area that hasn't been reviewed in a while.
okay.
And so they will be the last core area, and then we'll start up again with high school math, middle school math, and high school science. Those were done 2020, 2021, early 2022. I don't have those numbers in front of me. And we'll make decisions. We may wanna look at a new resource, we may wanna keep what we're doing. So just because it comes up for review doesn't mean we didn't need a new resource. We just need to initiate the conversation to make sure we're all on the same page. Sometimes you get a new resource and sometimes you're like, no, we're good. So.
Yeah.
And it's working for kids, it's working for teachers,
Right.
that kind of thing.
Any other questions about the science? Well, you're welcome. Okay, then we'll move on to action items. Okay. Actually, pretend I didn't say that.
Back up.
Just thank you, everybody, you know, for all of the information. This was a lot, but like I appreciate gathering feedback from the teachers and then like providing all that you did. This was obviously very, I would say, in-depth. And I just want to acknowledge that I appreciate it and that we can talk to when we get into the next meeting date, but I'm like, I'm gonna need a little bit of time to think, you know, like let it marinate. But I appreciate all that was put into this and then having teachers and hearing from teachers about this.
I'm glad to get you guys all the way caught up.
That's right.
So it wasn't just this year, we had to bring you back like
Right.
way, all the way up to speed.
Right.
All
Make sure we're
up to
all
date
on the same page.
Yeah, but I appreciate it. Okay, now we could go into action items. And so is this as simple as are you talking or am I just making a
I don't
motion?
need to talk unless you have questions. We talked about it a little bit last time. You heard from Lisa Kiefer, our business chair, that we're ready to go with these. So yes, somebody could make a motion to approve the financial literacy standards.
Yeah, the
Unless you-
presentation last time was super helpful to understand that process, so.
Yeah, and I valued hearing from, you know, Lisa and the teacher doing it, saying like, yep, these are appropriate. The course is totally aligned to these standards. And I think I remember you saying too that like these standards are really aligned in K through 12, but like it's obviously the heaviest the older the kids get, but I'm aware of like the BizTown and elementary school and then junior achievement and the younger. So I can see how it, you know, is dabbled throughout the district and then gets, I don't know, I wanna say more intense, but
Yes,
They're
it gets more
specific.
intentional
Yeah,
and
more
specific as they get older. And Nina and I have talked that some of the pieces, particularly in elementary, just as we've kind of thumbed through it, we're like, a lot of this is going to be accounted already in our social studies and in
Right.
BizTown and There was something about passwords and logins and keeping those safe, from a standpoint of like your, online banking and things like that. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure at the elementary level, we incorporate that in our library media and some of the different things. So we'll take a first stab at like which ones of these are already covered and where are they. We'll engage our grade level leads probably in doing some of that too, and then look at what's left and decide, are these priorities for us? So I don't see that as being a heavy lift for teachers in doing that, because I think we can, just from a curricular standpoint, can take care of some of that.
Okay. Any other questions? Then can I just say, like, is there a motion to recommend approval of the personal financial literacy standards?
Sounds great.
Steve is making the motion.
I will second.
Becky is gonna second. Do I say any discussion?
Yeah, yes.
We
I
good?
think we did discuss.
Okay. I just wanna make sure I'm doing this correctly.
You're doing great.
Okay, so all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you very much. We can get those posted on the website
Usable.
as the official, as the official
fun. Okay, so then the next item, I always, there's the committee agenda items on here. I'll be honest, my brain right now is really in what we talked about today, but did either of you have something moving forward? Or to add, I'm saying, to this sheet. What's that sheet? This
Yes, we
sheet.
kind of have a long sheet, and then we
Right.
have tentatively started drafting our own new
Okay.
one, just
So
as
if
we go
there's-
into next year. So if there's anything, we can change this at any time, but there are things we do annually, so we've started talking about that.
Okay.
Or should cover annually, I guess, but yes, if you have anything you want to see coming forward, we're all ears.
And again, it doesn't have to be here, there's no requirement
Okay.
that it.
Right, yes, no
Okay.
pressure, we can.
Yeah.
Then, so then, talking about next meeting date, or are we adjourning first?
We can talk about next meeting date. I know we talked about a July meeting as we started comparing calendars.
July doesn't look so good.
Well, I think it just looks complicated with the 4th of July, some vacation. I'm gonna try and take a little vacation in July. Just all of those
Right.
pieces. So, we can be flexible and work with whatever. Just wanted to know that was getting a little tricky.
Okay, so could we look at doing like a meeting in, I don't have a calendar with me, but like in 2 weeks, like just do another one in June and then not do one in July?
Absolutely.
Like June 25th?
Yeah, like looking at the week of June 22nd. So that's in 2 weeks, okay, so then June 25th would be the Thursday. Yeah, does that work?
Mhm.
Yeah.
A lot of committee meetings that week.
It's the committee week extravaganza.
No, there's a policy meeting that week.
Yeah, and there's student services on the 22nd.
Policy's 23rd, right?
Yes.
It's fine. Just.
Yeah, you're offering. Right, because the following week is 4th of July. And then, July gets crazy. So I'm available on June 25th,
And then after that, looking more toward like early.
August.
If that's acceptable, I think that would probably be the easiest, just in terms of timeframe.
It's really funny because we scheduled student services on the 22nd, which is my birthday.
Oh no!
And the 25th is my anniversary.
Remember, it's my anniversary too! My husband's going out of town though. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, I'm like, we're doing all the days, your last day of school,
It's
your birthday, your anniversary, oh gosh.
What other important events do you have, Becky? We'll plan it on
Get all
your.
those, yes, get all those, that's.
Okay.
6 p.m., June 25th.
June
Okay.
25th, 6 p.m.
Our meeting will be at the new district office, so don't come here. Nobody will be here, but, and then, Would you be comfortable putting approval of the science standards on that
Yes.
agenda then? Okay.
I mean, I definitely heard stuff about restoring some curriculum stuff and the policy, the supplemental material. Like I hear what's being said and I do value taking additional time to reflect. Or are we like, let's do it?
Possible for us to be presented with those units to review? Like we were looking at the middle school social studies, high school social
Yeah.
studies.
I believe we
If we put it under discussion,
we could put it under discussion. I'm just thinking of electronic access for them to actually see
yes,
units.
I will work on that.
Okay.
I can help with it. Cause I think I have access to all of the status.
Yeah, I don't know that we'll have teachers present
That's okay.
and ready to go, but I can certainly come and we can share a unit overview, we can share, share a little bit about the resources.
So one side I have the middle school social studies, high school social studies, and then there was a sixth grade ELA. So those three, would be great.
And if we're successful, we should be able to get you that ahead of time, so.
Okay.
I think. Looking at Laura, is
I
there-
will absolutely work on it.
Okay, work on that with our reps. Laura's got all that those electronic pieces with the vendors to get that access. So you can see the actual resource.
In addition, the science standards. So that supplemental material policy, is that something the curriculum talks about or that should go to the policy committee?
Let's see, back in the day, we initially wrote it with a joint curriculum and policy meeting. Moving forward with Neola, Mr. Munoz, what would be your?
You mean 361?
Yes, when we did 361, we did joint curriculum and policy. How would that fall with Neola now?
We can just throw it in the policy. We have a policy committee in a couple weeks.
On the 23rd.
But I think it's an AG now, right?
There's a policy and then there's an attached AG, and the AG is really where the, if memory serves me correctly, where the approval process and the forms come from. So we could look at the policy, but it may be more of the AG that we wanna shift. There may be shifts in the policy
Yeah,
as well.
the reason I bring up the AGs is in our new policy book, the AGs are right now we have procedures,
Mhm.
but Neola identifies a procedure as an administrative guideline.
Mhm.
According to the new policies that go live July 1, I can change the AGs based on a discussion and then just inform the board. So that's the nature of it.
So that discussion can happen at the policy.
Right, that's what I'm doing, I'm doing that actually on the 23rd, I'm bringing a series of AGs that have already been updated based on the Act 89, which is some sexual assault awareness piece, plus updates to SUSO. So both of those are student support organizations, SSOs. So all of those updates have been re-updated through Neola. So all of that is gonna come, all those AGs, even though we've already written them and they're brand new, they're being changed already before we start. So I'll be bringing the AGs to the policy committee meeting and say, hey, I've already made all these adjustments, just so you're aware, if you have any input or changes or suggestions based on the pre-drafting, they wouldn't go to the regular board meeting because I can change them. But the process is to make the committee aware of any adjustments that I make for the AGs.
Is it possible to see, because supplemental materials is a pretty, like Neola has an AG on it, right? Would it be possible to see just what Neola's looks like?
We did it, we drafted it.
But I thought it was also, it was like a combined one, where it was Neola and school district in Miami Falls, and like the
It is.
Mhm.
It is, but it's the base of it, the majority of it is Neola. That was the one that whoever had originally done it years ago had actually, not me,
Right.
had used a lot of a Neola template from years ago. That's that one where Thompson had found out when we were doing our initial drafting that the vast majority of it was actually a Neola template. Some of it wasn't, clearly, but we have it all broken down.
So, yeah, what I would be curious about is seeing like the Neola policy just as Neola versus what's the AG that's gonna be adopted July 1? And is this just as simple as communicating to teachers that like, you're good? Or is it, oh, we're just gonna go with, or not just, but we're gonna go with the Neola written, fully Neola written one and communicate that? Do you get what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, we could do one or either of that. We've already pre-drafted the AG that is subsequent or aligned with 361. So we already have that pre-drafted. And we took it to the school board just because that was we decided we were taking AGs and policies to the school board initially for the new Neola book. That said, we're not doing that with AGs going forward because we don't have to. We can change them at the policy level.
Okay.
Right? The policies, we'll have policies on the 23rd. For example, there's a whole bunch of Act 89 policies. I think 7 or 8 specific Act 89 policies that will require quite a bit of work this summer so that we can prep for the fall. But those policies will have to go to the board because they're actually substantial updates based on Act 89.
So do I have access to an AG that is just purely Neola written for supplemental materials?
We do,
Can I see that?
sure.
But that will be something that policy.
Mhm.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, we have all that. So anything that, for example, anything that we didn't adopt when we went through Neola drafting,
Right.
they still exist. I mean,
Right.
Neola's sitting, they can see these are Menominee Falls'
Right.
policies and AGs.
Mhm.
But then there's a whole bunch that we didn't
Right.
select that are just sitting there in template.
Right.
Plus, they're also aware of the edits that we made that are specific to Menominee Falls,
Right.
which is like 4%-ish.
Right.
4 to 5%, so 95 to 96% of all AGs and policies were boilerplate.
So yeah, I would just be curious to see the Neola
Yeah, we have all that.
one alone. Okay. Send it over my way.
Okay.
So it sounds like that will go through policy.
Yeah.
Throughout the curriculum. Okay. So
We have a
have-
pretty busy day tomorrow, so it might be Monday.
That's okay, no. Or you know what? Give it to me at 11 p.m. When you're not sleeping. I'm totally kidding. Monday is totally fine.
So we have approval of the science standards and then the 3 resources, those 3 individual chapters, discussion,
Mm-hmm.
potential action,
Yes,
discussion and action. Okay.
but you're gonna look if you can send that to us ahead of time.
Yes, we will do our best to work with the reps and get you that access.
Typically, it looks like just like a sample login from the vendor that we can share with you. They ask that you don't share it out with the public or anything because it's copyrighted information.
Yeah.
We've done it in the past, and I'll get it to you as soon as I can.
I mean, the other thing is there just a book?
Not any copies here.
Oh, okay.
It's all at the schools.
Gotcha.
So, I mean, you could probably track it down.
But I just was more offering, like, if something's easier.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. At this point, it might, we'll talk, we'll figure it out, depending on where our vendors are and what they're doing. Going and finding the books might be easier, in which case we can do that.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you.
So, if there's no further business, should we motion to adjourn? Steve is the motion.
I will second that.
Becky is the second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. So the motion carries, we are adjourned, and the meeting is adjourned at 9:23.